Chapter 32:57. After saying that, he lost interest in chatting and decided to fight to the end. Because of the medicine she took, he was now taking precautions. When it was over, he let out a breath and looked at the woman under him. Her nose was red, and her body was trembling slightly. She looked very uncomfortable. He didn't go to the bathroom like before. Instead, he leaned against her and touched her hair. He asked hoarsely, "What else are you not satisfied with? Did it make you uncomfortable?" Although he hadn't compared himself, he felt that he was not bad among men. She was not satisfied? Bai Shueli covered her face with the quilt. She didn't want to talk to him. He was so rough, and he still had the cheek to ask if she was uncomfortable? Not every woman would feel pleasure after being raped. Her attitude angered him again, and he pulled the blanket away. Just as he was about to vent his anger, he saw that her back was covered in bruises from the marks he had left behind, and his anger immediately disappeared. He touched it with his fingers and asked, "Does it hurt a lot?" "It hurts more inside." She sounded angry. "Yi Mulin, you still have the cheek to say that you want a child. I've been injured many times because of this, and I'm always taking medicine. Do you think the child will be healthy?" He didn't expect her to say that. Bai Shueli looked down. "Anyway, in your heart, I'm just a tool. You don't have to think about it, and you don't have to worry about whether I'll get hurt." Yi Mulin looked at her and asked again, "Does it hurt a lot?" This time, his voice was more or less gentle. Bai Shueli pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "It hurts a lot." Yi Mulin sat up. "Let me see." She was stunned for a moment. No, but the light was already on. He looked at it carefully and didn't allow her to refuse. Bai Shueli was a little embarrassed. She turned her face away and gritted her teeth. "Yi Mulin, you're a bastard." "Yes, I'm a bastard. I hate you." She breathed heavily because of his actions. He laughed in a low voice, and his chest shook. She was a little surprised, probably because he rarely laughed. He looked good when he laughed, but she felt that it was even more annoying. Yi Mulin checked and found that there was nothing wrong with her. However, she was in pain every time and did not look like she was enjoying it. He felt that there was something wrong. If he gave in a little bit so that she could be a little more content in this marriage, he was willing to try. The eldest son of the Yi family got out of bed and went to the study. Bai Shueli's heart was like a dog. This man had slept with her in the middle of the night, and he was still concerned about work? Workaholic. She kicked the quilt angrily, but her leg was throbbing in pain. She scolded him a few more times before closing her eyes to sleep. Just as she was about to fall asleep, a tall figure crept onto the bed. Then he kissed her. In the darkness, she opened her eyes wide and passively felt the entanglement of their lips and teeth. He rarely kissed her, so she rarely tasted this kind of feeling. That unfamiliar, manly scent kept drilling into her nose. No, her body. It was even more intimate and secretive than the most intimate thing. Why was he kissing her? Was there something wrong with his brain? Bai Shueli's eyes widened as she looked at the man in front of her helplessly. Chapter 32:58. He kissed her from top to bottom, leaving nothing behind. She kept her eyes wide open. Her hands were originally on the pillow, but when he let go of her, she did not know where to put them. In the end, her hands gently hugged his black head. Omitting 10,000 words about Boss Ye's kidney function, when it was all over, she lay on the bed, biting her lips, her fingers moving gently on the pillow. Her body felt like it had gone through a storm and was comforted by a gentle breeze. It was an indescribable feeling, a feeling that she had never felt before. It was like the first time she had sex with him. Yi Mulin lay down, his slender fingers curling around her hair from time to time. He needed to think about how he should treat his wife. He went to the study just now to take a look. Ahem. All men like to look. As a gifted student, he quickly learned how to use it and made his wife very satisfied. He could feel it a few times. But wasn't he spoiling her too much? Yi Mulin wasn't a man who liked to spoil women. He felt that it would damage his dignity. He liked it when she was afraid of him, and he liked to control everything. But now that she was lying here so softly because he had made her like this, a pure male joy welled up in his heart. It was very contradictory. Yi Mulin instinctively wanted to smoke again, but he hesitated because of Bai Shueli. In the end, he still smoked. When he was smoking, unexpectedly, she didn't stop him. Instead, she closed her eyes and moved her body towards him. Just like that, Yi Mulin made a decision. After smoking, he pulled up the blanket and went to sleep. The next morning, he was probably addicted to it. Ignoring her wishes, he dragged her out of the blanket and did it again. It took a total of 2 hours. In the past, she would scold him after they were done. But now, she was very obedient and just lay there without moving. Yi Mulin suddenly felt that it was quite interesting. It seemed that this was more satisfying than making her cry. Of course, she cried too, but this kind of crying was different. He couldn't describe it, but any man who had a woman would understand. Yi Mulin chuckled and reached out to rub her eyes. Sleep for a while more. I'm going to work. Bai Shueli lay there without making a sound. She didn't have the energy to care about him. After a while, her lips were blocked by something soft. Those were his lips. Stunned, she opened her eyes and stared at him blankly. Yi Mulin smiled. I'm going to take a bath. She stared blankly for a long time before she finally said, Are you sick? Yi Clan's eldest brother's face darkened at once, and he glared at her. She naturally did not dare to provoke him again, so she closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. Only then did Yi Mulin feel better. After all, she was still afraid of him. He was about to leave, but he stopped and muttered, Don't seduce Mubai again, or I'll break your legs myself. It's none of your business. Bai Shueli turned her face away. He wanted to get angry with her, but decided against it. What was the point of arguing with this shallow woman? He went to take a shower. When he passed by the mirror, he saw his slightly raised lips and couldn't help but be stunned. He looked very satisfied, but was there really a need to be so satisfied? He purposely darkened his face, but after a while, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up after the shower. He changed his clothes and looked at her as he passed the bed. Or did he still think that she was shallow? Chapter 32:59. Bai Shueli was still asleep. Yi Mulin went downstairs in a good mood. His mother always got up early. She looked at her son's expression and smiled. You're up so early. Did you sleep well? Yi Mulin was used to a Western breakfast. He drank a cup of black coffee and said to his mother, Not really. Mommy looked at him carefully and smiled. You don't look like you didn't sleep well. Mulin, when did you become so insincere? Yi Mulin looked down and smiled lightly. Mother Yi looked at her eldest son. In fact, Mulin's appearance was not inferior to Mubai's at all. It was just that he was too strict and people ignored his appearance. The mother and son ate quietly. After a while, Bai Shueli came down. She usually didn't sleep until noon. She was wearing silk pajamas, and her hair was a little messy. She yawned and walked down. Seeing Yi Mulin was still at home, her eyes widened. Then she looked at Yi Mulin and said, I'm hungry. Yi Mulin put down the coffee in his hand and looked at his wife seriously. Didn't you greet your elders so early in the morning? Bai Shueli opened her eyes wide. Did I eat your food? But she thought of the card from last night. She really ate his food. Yi Mulin looked at her. She couldn't greet him, especially since it seemed like she was too weak in front of him. Mother Yi was very easygoing. Mulin, look at your serious face. You don't have to be so serious in court. If you go home earlier in the future, you can go out to eat with Bai Shueli. Young couples don't have to accompany me at home every day. Eat with a poker face like him? Bai Shueli refused in her heart. She immediately squeezed a smile and sat at the dining table. Mom, I like to accompany you. Mother Yi patted her little hand happily. Bai Shueli is still very good. Mulin, you can't always bully her. As a mother, she naturally saw the kiss mark on Bai Shueli's neck. She felt a little sad and happy. Her son finally got it. She was worried that her son was too insensitive before. Now it was great. Bai Shueli ate breakfast and didn't notice that Yi Mulin smiled slightly because she said Mom. The smile was very light. just a slight twitch of the corner of his mouth. But then, he looked at her sternly. Bai Xueli, have you brushed your teeth? Bai Xueli frowned as she nibbled on her croissant. No? Can I have breakfast without brushing my teeth? She continued to eat as she spoke. Yi Mulin glared at her. Go upstairs and brush your teeth before coming down. I don't want to. Bai Xueli bit her lip. I'm going to sleep later. Brushing my teeth now is unnecessary. Yi Mulin snorted coldly. You can even find such an excuse, Bai Xueli, you are shallow worm. She looked at him provocatively. If you don't appreciate me, why did you marry me? She was relying on the fact that Yi Mulin did not dare to act rashly in front of Mama Yi, so she went against him. But she really underestimated men. All men were actually the same. No matter how serious a man was, once he opened the door to a new world, he could also be very shameless. Yi Mulin was like this. He smiled faintly and looked at her. Do I need to admire you when I marry you? Usually, it's fine as long as it can carry on the family line. Chapter 30-60. She was so angry that she didn't want to eat breakfast anymore. She put down the bread and ran upstairs. Remember to brush your teeth. I hate lazy women, he said coldly behind her. Mama Yu was stunned for a moment before she said to her son, Mulin, when did you become so calculative? Yi Mulin took another sip of coffee and said, I'm disciplining her. Shirley isn't a child. You don't have to be so strict with her. Mama Yu was still trying to persuade him. Yi Mulin just drank his coffee and didn't say anything. After breakfast, he went to the office. He was a very busy man, the kind of workaholic that Bai Shirley described. He liked work, and work was his focus. But now, he would occasionally think of his wife. Especially last night, when she cried and clung to him, it made him reminisce. It turned out that women could be so soft. He couldn't help but regret that he should have been gentler to her before. It was much more interesting than the simple physical fight. His secretary was astonished at his absent-mindedness, for lawyers of the night were never absent-minded when they were at work. When she took the document for Yi Mulin to sign, the secretary couldn't help but ask softly, Lawyer Yi, what's so happy about? Yi Mulin calmed himself down and looked at his secretary. He said calmly, Nothing. The secretary nodded and stood up straight. After Yi Mulin signed, she whispered, Lawyer Yi, it's my birthday today. I'll treat everyone to dinner. Do you want to come? Yi Mulin looked up at his secretary. The secretary had worked for him for several years, and her work had always been satisfactory. As his boss, he should give her face for a birthday dinner. He smiled and said, Okay. The secretary didn't expect her boss to be so straightforward. She twisted her hand and hesitated. Lawyer Yi, you can bring your family. Then she turned around and ran away. After she left, Yi Mulin realized that he had been ridiculed, but he wasn't angry. But bring Shirley. He took his phone and thought about it. She only knew how to shop and talk about beauty and fashion. She couldn't get along well with the female lawyers in his office. He still didn't call. At noon, he found time to pick a gift for the secretary. It was his birthday, so Yi Mulin wasn't stingy. He picked a bag worth more than 50,000 yuan as a reward. He wanted to go back to work immediately, but when he walked to the counter on the first floor, he saw a necklace. After standing there for about 5 seconds, the counter lady immediately came forward with a smile and said, Sir, what can I do for you? The counter ladies of these luxury brands all had discerning eyes. With one look, they could tell that Yi Mulin was rich, so their attitude was extremely warm. Yi Mulin's expression changed slightly. He walked over and pointed at the necklace. Help me wrap it up. It wasn't very expensive, but he liked the style very much. It was simple and elegant, with a 50-cent diamond in the middle. The chain was made of rainbow gold, but the craftsmanship was excellent. With such good business, the counter lady was very excited. Sir, you really have a good eye. This is a limited edition from Tiffany. It's called Gift of Love. You must be giving it to your wife, right? She glanced at the bag in his hand. The bags in the shop are also very tasteful. Your wife must also be someone with great taste. Chapter 30-61. Hearing Yi Mulin's words, the counter lady became even more cheerful. She smiled even more professionally. Do you like extravagance? Our brand also has low-key and luxurious ones. Do you want to take a look? The counter lady pointed at a row of high-end models, all of which cost more than a few million. Yi Mulin didn't really appreciate them, but he still took a fancy to a 30-carat 6-clawed diamond ring and asked the counter lady to take it out. The counter lady's heart was trembling. This was the treasure of their brand. This diamond ring cost more than 80 million. There was only one in the world because it was made from the center of a South African diamond. It was dazzling. Of course, the price was also dazzling. When the counter lady was recommending it, her eyes were still a little cautious. Yi Mulin looked at it again. Wrap it up for me. The counter lady's eyes widened in disbelief. That was it? He bought it for more than 80 million. He didn't even bring a woman to try it? The counter lady was so excited that she stammered, Sir, do you want to pay by card or cash? Yi Mulin looked at her. Do you want to use a truck to transport the cash? The counter lady was incoherent. Sorry, I was just too excited. More than 80 million. She could buy a suite in a third-tier city with a commission and make a down payment in H city. God, a golden egg really fell from the sky. Soon, she finished the paperwork. When she handed it to Yi Mulin, she was a little envious. She didn't know which woman could make this man pay for it. Yi Mulin said calmly, It's my wife. The counter lady's expression was a little dreamy. Sure enough, the best was reserved for his wife. The secretary only had a bag worth tens of thousands. Yi Mulin returned to his office and closed the door. He was not in the mood to deal with work. He took out the diamond ring and looked at it. In fact, he didn't know why he bought it. He understood the meaning of a diamond ring. It represented not only marriage but also a promise. He frowned. His promise to buy Xueli? That shallow worm? He had always despised her. Other than her beautiful body, which gave him great enjoyment, he really felt that she had no other good points. But as a wife, especially the wife of a man like him, her beautiful body made him willing to go home early. In fact, it was her biggest advantage. Moreover, her body was very suitable for pregnancy. But can't like her so stupid shallow. Therefore, it was better to give birth to a boy and let him teach him personally. Yi Mulin didn't realize that he was looking forward to his marriage with Bai Xueli. He decided to put the diamond ring aside for now, so he put it in the drawer and threw the necklace box into his briefcase. At 6:00 in the evening, he got off work and called his mother to tell her that he wouldn't be back for dinner. Mama Yi said in a low voice that she would tell Shirley. When his mother said this, he didn't even have the slightest intention of objecting. Instead, he smiled faintly and agreed. After that, more than 20 people in the office went to the gathering. It was the little secretary's birthday, so of course, Yi Mulin wouldn't let her pay for it herself. He swiped his card, and a meal for 2 tables added up to 20 to 30,000 yuan. By the time they finished dinner, it was already past 8:00. Of course, they had not enjoyed themselves to their heart's content yet. Therefore, those who had a rich nightlife recommended a bar. Everyone refused to let go of Yi Mulin, their sugar daddy, and asked him to go with them. Yi Mulin did not care. When he arrived, he tossed the bag to the little secretary from the car. Chapter 30-62. The little secretary hugged her bag and was so touched that she was about to cry. Everyone looked at her with envy. A colleague raised her hand. It's my birthday next month too. Lawyer Yi, please join us. Then everyone raised their hands. We're all celebrating our birthday this year, Lawyer Yi. Yi Mulin laughed and held a cigarette. Give everyone 100,000 yuan and buy it yourself. If I buy a bag for a female colleague, my wife will suspect that I'm having an improper relationship. His occasional jokes made the atmosphere even livelier. Everyone crowded around the rich man and went to the bar. It was late at night, and the atmosphere inside was even more intense. A group of 20 or so people picked their seats and sat down. Yi Mulin, a heavy smoker, only smoked. He didn't touch a single drop of alcohol and was extremely disciplined. His subordinates didn't care, and the female subordinates wouldn't have any feelings for him because Yi Mulin was like an insulator of gossip. He wasn't interested in women at all. Most of the time, the girls in the firm were saying that Lawyer Yi had a cold personality and that was why he didn't have a girlfriend. But Lawyer Ye's marriage was very magical. He got married with a bang. His wife was still his sister-in-law. This was a bit hard to say, but they also heard that the woman was from the Bai family. It was understandable. Lawyer Yi sacrificed himself for Yi Mu Bai. But if Lawyer Yi really had a cold personality, then did Lawyer Yi and Bai Shuoli have sex for the rest of their lives? The girls looked at each other, and then a bold one asked, "Lawyer Yi, do you love your wife?" Yi Mulin frowned and took a long drag on his cigarette. He stared at them. "Why are you asking this?"
Just asking.
The one who asked the question smiled and didn't dare to say another word. Yi Mulin smiled faintly. "She's quite good. She likes to stay at home with my mother. She likes tea and flower arranging. She's a very traditional girl." The young lawyers all gasped and were extremely envious. They could smell the sour smell of love. Yi Mulin felt a bit of an in his heart. But as a man, he couldn't say how shallow his wife was in front of his subordinates, even though she was very shallow. But it couldn't be denied that what he said was the truth. She did stay at home these days, and was very homebody. Also, he enjoyed the envy of the female subordinates. He felt that what he said was the truth. Bai Shuoli, that worm, was exactly what he thought she was. However, very soon, the high and mighty Lawyer Yi was slapped in the face. Next to the steel pipe on the stage, a hot figure appeared. It was extremely hot. Her long, curly hair was spread over her delicate shoulders. Her eyes were full of charm. Her slender body was wearing a fiery red suspenders. Her skirt was so short that it barely covered her butt. Her pair of fair legs could make any man go crazy. She spun lightly on the stage a few times, and the audience screamed crazily. Her eyes were so charming that water could come out of them. Yi Mulin's secretary was so excited that she almost grabbed Yi Mulin's hand. "God, sexy goddess. Wow, look at that leg. I can play with it for a year." Yi Mulin narrowed his eyes. His eyes were so gloomy that they were about to drip water. Of course, he knew how terrifying those legs were, because they had been wrapped around him since last night. His eyes were frozen as he stared at the damned woman on the stage. Homebody, likes tea art, likes flower arrangement. Bullshit. She was simply a dog that could not change its spots. Chapter 32-63. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Mulin directly went on the stage and reached out to grab the red. Bai Shuoli glared at him.
"So, did he?"
At this time, Lawyer Ye's eyes were almost spurting fire, as if he was going to burn the half-exposed clothes on her body. What kind of immoral thing was that? He took off his coat and forcefully put it on her shoulders. He said in a low voice, "Go back with me." Bai Shuoli stared at him. "No, me and my friends are having sex." His face was so gloomy. "Believe it or not, I'm going to have sex with you, Bai Shuoli." He quickly buttoned up the coat, but only the top was blocked and the bottom was still unprotected. The two white and tender legs were in front of everyone, almost blinding everyone's eyes. Yi Mulin really wanted to pick up the gun and shoot at the sky. "All of you, close your eyes." His face was dark, and he dragged her outside. His legal team was dumbfounded. That was Lawyer Ye's wife? She was so beautiful and had a good figure. Didn't she say that she liked to stay at home and arrange flowers and make tea? But she clearly danced 666 on the pole. But no one dared to say anything. As long as the boss was happy. Outside the bar, Bai Shuoli took off his coat and threw it on him as soon as she went out. She bit her lips. "You have no right to control me." Yi Mulin's lips curled into a cold smile. "Bai Shuoli, don't you have any self-respect? Don't you care about your reputation? Or do you think that I like to be cuckolded?" She paused for a moment and said very slowly, "You are prejudiced and discriminating." There was a touch of arrogance in his eyes. "Are you talking about your dress?" Bai Shuoli was a little hurt, and she turned around to leave. But her wrist was grabbed by him again, and his face was still dark. Do you still want to dress like this to dance for those men? Bai Shuali raised her head. Yes. The next second, Yi Mulan's expression was quite ugly. He stared at her eyes and said word by word, Bai Shuali, if you are sure, I have nothing to say. She thought that he was going to hit her, but he didn't. He just walked to his car and lit a cigarette. He seemed to be waiting for her. Bai Shuali had always been capricious. If he had forcefully dragged her home, it would not have been a big deal. However, he was undoubtedly letting her choose. If she sat in his car and went home with him, she would lose face. She bit her lip and stood there for a long time. Yi Mulan finished a cigarette and flicked the butt away. Then he started the car and left. From the beginning to the end, he did not look at her again. She actually felt that he looked down on her and thought that she was an indecent woman. Actually, she was just an indecent woman. She just liked to play around. He could choose not to marry her. If he married her, he would torment her in bed every day. Every time she came out to play, he would despise her to death.
Bastard.
Why didn't he change his own shortcomings? She walked back to the bar but did not dance again. By the time the party was over, it was already 2:00 in the night when she returned to the Yi family's old residence. Bai Shuali usually went out to play to her heart's content. Even after she married into the Yi family, she had never gone out. Today was the birthday of one of her sisters, so she went out. When she returned to the house, it was quiet inside. She carried her high heels upstairs quietly, for fear of waking up Mama Yi. What she was most afraid of was not Yi Mulan, but Mama Yi. That gentle knife was what she could not stand the most. Fortunately, Mama Yi was sleeping soundly tonight and did not come out. She walked upstairs quietly and opened the door of the master bedroom. Chapter 30-64. Bai Shuali breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she felt a little disappointed. Then she hated herself for being so useless. Did she feel itchy if she didn't get spanked for 3 days? What a bitch. Bai Shuali removed her makeup in front of the mirror and took a shower. She was still alone in the master bedroom. When she lay on the bed, she thought that he was probably in the study. She spent the whole night in shock and fear. If there was even the slightest sign of trouble, she would think that Yi Mulan had come over to smack her butt. But everything in her imagination didn't happen. At dawn, she was lying on the bed. Bai Shuali suddenly sat up and thought of Yi Mulan. She immediately ran to the study. There was no one in the study, but there was a smell of cigarettes. She waved her little hand and complained, how many cigarettes did he smoke to become like this? But no one could answer her. She was startled and ran downstairs. Mama Yi had finished breakfast and was giving orders to the servants. She looked at Bai Shuali and said gently, why don't you sleep a little longer? Is it to see Mulan off?
He's gone.
Bai Shuali was stunned. Gone. Yes, he's going on a business trip to Sea City. It might be a week. Didn't he tell you? Mama Yi laughed. I'll talk to him later. He forgot to tell you about the business trip. Bai Shuali lowered her head and suddenly said, Mom, it's not necessary. He doesn't tell me when he's on a business trip. After saying that, she walked upstairs. There was a little loneliness in her back. Mama Yi sighed softly. She gave birth to her son. How could she not see that her son was sulking? She didn't know why he didn't like Bai Shuali. Mama Yi always thought that he was too serious and had high expectations of Bai Shuali. This daughter-in-law had been spoiled since she was a child. She was a little spoiled, but she didn't think there was anything wrong with her. Mulan could do whatever he wanted and respected her very much. He wasn't a bad person. It was just that the Bai family didn't teach him well. Mama Yi thought to herself. But soon, she knew why her son was angry. Bai Shuali's photo with a pole was published in the mainstream media with Yi Mulan's dark expression. This was a heavy blow to the Bai family and the Yi family. Although Yi Mubai suppressed it immediately, he could suppress the mainstream media, but he couldn't suppress the tabloids. Everyone knew that the eldest son of the Yi family had married a wife who loved to play around. Bai Shuali didn't dare to go out and stayed upstairs all day. She felt wronged. If she hadn't been married in the past, this kind of photo would have been nothing. Wasn't it just a little hotter? It was not a big deal to show off a little bit of his legs. However, after marrying Yi Mulin, that bastard, it seemed like she owed the whole world for this pole dance. Bai Shueli cursed in her heart, and she couldn't get through to his phone. The stingy man was obviously still angry. Bai Shueli was so angry that she decided to go out and have fun. I really don't know what's the point of being trapped here and living like a widow every day. She had just changed her clothes, put on some makeup, and was about to go out with her bag. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Yi Mulin. He was travel-worn and didn't have much of an expression on his face. Even when he saw the clothes she was wearing, he didn't show much displeasure. He only said lightly, "Bai Shueli, let's live separately." Bai Shueli froze for a moment, and her eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she heard. When her long-awaited wish came true, she didn't feel happy at all. Chapter 30-65. She looked at him for a long time before she said something irrelevant. "How long will you be apart?" Yi Mulin glared at her and walked upstairs. Bai Shueli didn't care about the clothes on her body and immediately ran upstairs. Yi Mulin went upstairs to the study, took off his coat, and sat behind a desk. He didn't work but tidied up his things. Bai Shueli stood at the door and saw him putting things in a big box. She asked, "You want to move out?" Yi Mulin held a cigarette and looked up at her. "You want to move out?" Bai Shueli said without thinking, "This is your house. I should move out." Yi Mulin stood up and walked straight to her. His eyes were deep and he frowned. "Bai Shueli, you're still my wife. Before we get a divorce, you'd better not expose any scandals." Bai Shueli looked down. "Yi Mulin, do you hate me?"
Yes.
His voice was hoarse. Bai Shueli stared at him and raised the box in her hand. "Didn't you buy this necklace for me?" Yi Mulin stared at her. "Where did you find it?" She didn't answer his question but continued to ask, "I just want to ask you, did you buy it for me?" Bai Shueli. Yi Mulin said coldly, "Give it to me." She was dressed so skimpily in front of him. She walked to the window and was about to throw it away. Yi Mulin grabbed her and glared at her. "Damn it, how dare you?" "I dare, unlike some people who obviously bought it for me. Why don't they dare to admit it?" Bai Shueli snorted and walked to the door of the study. "You want to live apart? But I'll say it first. Don't come back and climb into my bed when you're full of lust." Yi Mulin glared at this damn woman and wanted to strangle her. Bai Shueli suddenly thought of her father's words. If you can't deal with Yi Mulin, don't go home. If Yi Mulin and she were finished, no one would pay for her card anymore. Bai Shueli was not stupid. Right now, she had to coax this beastly man. She had guessed correctly. His ejaculation had been going on for a few days, so he must be bored to death. He leaned forward and placed the necklace on his neck. "Does it look good?" Yi Mulin looked at her, and she put the necklace around her neck. Her neck was beautiful to begin with, and the collarbone chain made it look even more slender. His anger subsided a little. He let go of her and went to pack his things. Bai Shueli bit her lip. "Are you mad at me for wearing this? I'll just take it off." Yi Mulin coldly spat out a few words, "Shameless." Shamelessly, she went to close the door and took off the clothes she was wearing. After kicking it off, he picked up a shirt on the sofa and put it on his body. Yi Mulin kept looking at her and realized that she was even more seductive in his shirt than when she wasn't wearing it, especially when she walked in front of him and looked up with a fawning expression. "Is it okay now?" Yi Mulin was still indifferent. "Throw the clothes into the trash can." "Oh," she replied and immediately left. She was very obedient. Chapter 30-66. Let go. He was as old-fashioned as an old man. "What are you doing?" It was Bai Shueli's first time seducing him, so she was a little nervous. After all, she was also afraid of pain. However, it was better than being kicked out of the house. She hugged him tightly, and her little hands moved down. She deliberately tried to please him. "Don't you miss me at all?" Yi Mulin frowned. This was really not her style. She would only call him a bastard and a beast. He stood still. His wife turned to him, tiptoed, and kissed his lips gently. Yi Mulin narrowed his eyes and looked down at her coldly. After Bai Shueli kissed him, he was still unmoved. She was a little impatient. Yi Mulin, what else do you want? It's just a steel pipe. I'm not lying on the same bed with another man. Are you done? He looked at her coldly and reached out to pull her hair. Bai Shueli had always been a little afraid of him. She lowered her voice. I'm done. Yi Mulin was still pulling her hair.
His voice was very calm.
Beg me to stay. Beg me not to separate. Beg me not to abandon you.
What?
Bai Shueli was stunned. Damn, this man quarreled and reconciled in such a unique way. Did he need someone to beg him? It was obvious that he was in a daze. If he wanted to do it, he had to put on this elite expression. She bit her lips. I'm not begging. If you can, then separate. Divorce. If you can, then don't touch me. As soon as she finished speaking, her body was lifted into the air. Then they went straight to the master bedroom. She buried her face in his shoulder. There was a touch of pride on her little face. This beast really couldn't stand being teased. Yi Mulin stretched out his hand and patted her butt. His voice was a little lazy. Or beg me to do it with you. No. She lay on his shoulder and gave him a small bite. This was undoubtedly the biggest tease for a man. The eldest brother of the Yi family directly kicked the door and threw her on the big bed. They were making too much noise kicking the door around. Mama Yi, who was downstairs, was not deaf. She was originally very worried, but when she saw her son behaving like a beast when she came up, she could not help but smile as if absence made the heart grow fonder. When he walked downstairs, he met the head of Yi family. Mama Yi said in a gentle voice, Mulin and Shirley should have a child soon. The frequency at which he produced humans was quite high. Speaking of Shirley, Mama Yi was also at a loss for words. However, it was undeniable that Shirley was good-looking and had a good figure. She looked like a little cow. With one look, there was no need to buy toxic milk powder in the future. Mama Yi thought about it and smiled slightly. Upstairs, Bai Shueli was thrown onto the bed. She bit her lips and placed her feet on Yi Mulin's shoulder. Don't come over. Didn't we say that we're going to separate? What is this? A breakup party. The eldest son of the Yi family was a pragmatic type, and he had long been flirted with. After being married for a few months, her appetite had long been fattened. After a few days of not having sex, she really needed to quench her thirst. Furthermore, she had mistaken him for someone else. He took seduction as an apology. She didn't know where he got that from. He grabbed her little foot and bit it with a strong taste. She screamed. He pressed her down and said in a low voice, Are you still going to dress like that in the future?
Yes.
With tears in her eyes, she got up and knelt in front of him. She said tearfully, Only for you to see. Yi Mulin's anger was gone. Soon, he kissed her lips. Chapter 30-67. After a night of indulgence, Bai Shueli couldn't even walk the next day, let alone dance the pole. She woke up when Yi Mulin was taking a shower. She gritted her teeth and thought to herself, it was not easy to serve as Yu Wang. Yi Mulin sat in the office all day long. She didn't know where he got such inhuman stamina.
Beast.
She hummed softly, but her hand unconsciously touched the necklace on her neck. She often bought luxury goods. Of course, she knew that the necklace was only tens of thousands, but the design was really beautiful and suitable for her. She bit her lower lip, wrapped herself in the small blanket, and ran to the mirror. She pulled her hair down and carefully admired herself. Later, she felt that she couldn't see clearly with the blanket, so she simply took the blanket and admired it carefully. She was so immersed that she didn't even notice Yi Mulin coming out of the changing room. He leaned against the door of the bathroom and looked at her, shallow. She wrapped the blanket and rolled her eyes at him. Are you saying that the gift you chose is tacky? It's tacky to wear anything on you, Lawyer Yi said coldly. Bai Shueli was furious. She pulled the blanket and threw it on the ground. She even stepped on it. I'm tacky. You hugged me so happily last night. Lawyer Yi sneered. You can't control the physiological things. Bai Shueli was furious. She pointed at him. I didn't want your love.
Didn't you?
He pulled her over. If you didn't, why do you always stare at the gift I gave you? He was well dressed, but she had nothing except the necklace. Her skin was rubbed by the wool fabric on his body. She felt a little rough. She couldn't help but step back, but he turned her back. Yi Mulin leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "You seduce me and want to run away?" She stared at him. Her leg was still hurting. He was a beast. Yi Mulin smiled. "You started the fire yourself. Put it out." He sat on the small sofa. His intention was very obvious. As long as she served him well, he didn't mind what method she used. Bai Shueli's heart cursed. He was really shameless. She didn't want it. She immediately ran away, but she still couldn't escape. Yi Mulin stretched out his hand, and she sat on his lap. He held her waist and treated her shamelessly. How could she be his opponent? Very quickly, he had his way with her. The eldest brother of the Yi clan was always very involved in this kind of thing, but Bai Shueli had enough. She was so full that she almost vomited. She lay down lazily and let him do whatever he wanted. At that moment, the phone in his pocket rang. Her body relaxed, and she felt that she could finally relax. However, Yi Mulin picked up the phone with one hand and held her waist with the other. He spoke to the other side of the phone in a warm voice. It was his secretary. Because he had an appointment with a client, and he was late for the first time. It was also because of women. Yi Mulin's voice was low, hoarse, and low. "Tell them I'm stuck in a traffic jam." After the young secretary took the bag, she was especially loyal. She sweetly said okay and hung up the phone. Bai Shueli bit her lips. "Yi Mulin, why don't you go to work? Why are you always pestering me?" He bit her lips, and his voice became even hoarser. "Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Shallow, you don't even understand this." Bai Shueli bit hard on his shoulder. "You're really fresh and refined to find such an excuse for your lust." Chapter 32-68. Lawyer Yi wasn't angry, but he didn't let her go either. After one time, he left her directly without a hug or anything else. He took off his pants and went to work. Bai Shueli lay on the sofa, drawing circles with her little hands. After a while, she reached out and touched the necklace on her neck. Suddenly, she laughed foolishly. Downstairs, when Yi Mulin went downstairs, his parents were all there. Especially Father Yi. Long Ma watched his eldest son go downstairs energetically. He coughed lightly. "You got up at this time?" Yi Mulin looked at the watch and smiled lightly. "I have a client." "I'm in a hurry, Dad." Father Yi was very dissatisfied. You don't even have breakfast? You're not a proper person after getting married." Mother Yi also said, "Yes, Mulin, your father is right. Although it's time for you to work hard on your career, you should also pay attention to your health. You can't skip breakfast." Yi Mulin paused and looked at his parents. "I'm already full upstairs." After all, Mother Yi was a woman. She didn't have so many cunning thoughts. She said with a straight face, "Nonsense, Aunt Gui didn't send breakfast upstairs." But the Yi family's head was a man. Although he wasn't proficient in these affairs, he had seen them. But this unfilial son dared to talk nonsense in front of his own mother, so he shouted, "Get out." Yi Mulin left. He went to the company in a good mood and met the client first. After sending the client away, he took out the diamond ring from the drawer and looked at it thoughtfully. His secretary Li Mi came in and looked at the big diamond ring in her boss's hand. She said with some envy, "Lawyer Yi, this must be for Mrs. Yi, right?" Yi Mulin looked at the little secretary, frowned, and asked slowly, "Is it beautiful?" The little secretary nodded immediately. "Mrs. Yi is very beautiful." "I mean, this diamond ring?" Yi Mulin corrected. The little secretary's eyes moved to the diamond ring, and her eyes were a little dull. Then she said blankly, "Of course, it's more beautiful." Yi Mulin was silent for a long time and then whispered, "Is it too easy for her if I forgive her so easily?" The little secretary was stunned and then said lightly, "Is it about pole dancing?" Lawyer Yi looked straight at her. The little secretary coughed lightly and whispered, "Lawyer Yi, actually pole dancing is not what you think it is. It's actually an art. If you really want to dance well, you have to put in a lot of effort. She gestured. For example, if you want to hang on a steel pipe, you have to use your skin to rub against it. It's normal to shave off a layer of skin during practice. Yi Mulin frowned. He remembered that Bai Shuali did not have any injuries on her body, which meant that she had learned it very early. He had been naughty since he was young. Lawyer Yi thought. The little secretary added. Nowadays, many places are training pole dancing. It's very popular. Lawyer Yi, although you're much older than Mrs. Yi, you can't be biased. Yi Mulin narrowed his eyes and glared at his little secretary. Am I that old? The little secretary had always been afraid of him, but this time, she plucked up her courage and said, Lawyer Yi, there is a 3-year-old generation gap. You and Mrs. Yi have a 3-year-old generation gap. The little secretary's voice was getting softer and softer because Lawyer Ye's face was getting uglier and uglier. Then, the little secretary ran away. Chapter 32:69. But thinking of last night's charm and this morning's wildness, he felt that it was not bad. They were obviously in tune with each other. Where was the generation gap? Yi Mulin looked at it for a long time and finally put the diamond ring into his briefcase. Then, when he was working, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He got off work early in the afternoon and walked out at 6 o'clock. Everyone was shocked. Lawyer Yi, was he possessed by something? Lawyer Yi, who didn't work overtime, was abnormal. Something was wrong. But there were also male colleagues who laughed. I have such a beautiful wife, and I don't work overtime every day. Someone was not convinced. Lawyer Yi has been married for a few months. She also worked overtime before. She was reserved before, but now she has opened the door to a new world. Someone laughed. Lawyer Yi probably endured for many years. Then, everyone laughed warmly. Actually, with such a beautiful wife, which man didn't want to go home early? Yi Mulin went back early, but Bai Shuali wasn't there. Only Mama Yi was directing the servants to prepare dinner. Seeing him come back, she was a little surprised. Mulin, why are you so early today? Yi Mulin smiled and hugged his mother. Nothing happened in the office. Mama Yi looked at him with a teasing look, then smiled and said, Shuali went to eat with her friends. Don't worry, it's a proper restaurant this time. Nothing will happen. Yi Mulin paused. She asked Mom to tell me? Mama Yi smiled. She told me Mulin, although Shuali has a lot of problems, she respects the elderly and is a good girl. Don't be mean to her when she comes back. Yi Mulin also smiled and didn't say anything. He went upstairs to take a shower, changed into home clothes, and went downstairs to accompany his mother. But Mama Yi could also see that her son was a little absent-minded. She joked, Your heart has flown away? Actually, it wasn't strange. Men were all lustful. Although her son was outstanding, Shuali was good-looking and had a good figure. It was normal for a young couple to love each other. Mama Yi suggested, Why don't you call Shuali and pick her up when she comes back? It's very chaotic outside now. It wouldn't be good if she accidentally took an online car and got into danger. Yi Mulin thought for a moment and nodded. I'll call after 8. Mama Yi was very pleased. They had dinner alone. Yi Mulin went upstairs to make the call, and the phone rang for a long time before he got through. He stood on the balcony and said fiercely, You've been out for so long. When are you coming back? On the other side, Bai Shuali seemed to be drunk. Her voice was a little intermittent. Who are you? Yi Mulin's face was completely black. He knew this woman couldn't be trusted. It was only one day, and she showed her. For a married woman to drink like this outside, what kind of person would that be? He suppressed his anger. Where are you? Bai Shuali blinked her eyes. After a long time, she smiled softly. In tavern heaven on earth. He cursed under his breath, and then his voice became colder. Let the person next to you answer the phone. Bai Shuali's voice was intermittent. It was a mess on the other side of the phone. After a while, the phone was transferred to the hands of a drunkard. However, the drunkard clearly stated the restaurant's address.
Yi.
Yi man, and immediately of a coat and wearing. Chapter 30, 270. Mama Yi smiled and said, "Drive carefully." Yi Mulin nodded and went to the garage to pick up a Land Rover Aurora. The headlights were turned on and the car drove out of the mansion. When they arrived at the restaurant, Bai Shuali was already drunk. There were 5 or 6 people gathered, but only one girl was sober, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She looked at Yi Mulin and said carefully, "Shuali is drunk. Are you taking her home?" Yi Mulin nodded and didn't hug the drunk girl. Instead, he kicked her and said, "Let's go home." The girl opened her eyes wide and looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. Was this Sister Shuali's husband? How could he be so rude? Sister Shuali's legs must have been bruised from that kick. She swallowed hard. At this time, Yi Mulin looked at the drunk cats and frowned. "Do you need help?" The girl couldn't have asked for more. She was worried about how to get these drunkards back. Yi Mulin took out his phone and called his 2 assistants, asking them to come over. After hanging up, he finally remembered his wife and picked her up with a disgusted look on his face. Bai Shuali lay in his arms and frowned.
Who are you?
"Why are you hugging me?" Then she started to punch and kick him. "Let go of me, you lecher. Silver rod." Yi Mulin patted her but with a pale face and said in a tense voice, "Behave." He carried her and walked to the parking lot outside and threw her into the car. Bai Shuali lay on the ground for a long time before she got up. She looked around in the darkness and felt dizzy. "Where am I?
Who am I?"
"Handsome, who are you?" She couldn't recognize Yi Mulin because he was wearing a pair of glasses. She waved her little hands and then smiled. "Let me tell you, don't even think about having a night with me because my husband is very fierce." She stretched out her leg. "I can kick you away with one kick." Yi Mulin's face darkened. He grabbed her leg and pressed it down. He leaned over and bit her neck. "Do you want a night?" Bai Shuali giggled. "I don't want to." His anger subsided a little.
"Why?"
"You don't dare?" Bai Shuali lay on the bed, her eyes bright and charming. "Because my husband is amazing." As she spoke, she laughed again. Her unrestrained look made him so angry that he wanted to strangle her. However, the words that came out of her little mouth were very effective. Yi Mulin adjusted his glasses and stared at her. Bai Shuali reached out and grabbed his collar, gently pulling him closer. Her expression was especially charming. "But I think you're pretty good too. Do you want to try?" She leaned in and kissed his lips. "Do you know why I'm attracted to you the most?" Yi Mulin looked at his wife with a dark expression. Bai Shuali chuckled and moved closer. "Your nose is very big." He simply wanted to strangle her to death. How could she say something like that? Shameless. He glared at her. Bai Shuali was still smiling happily. "I want to see if compared to my husband." Her little hand reached over, but Yi Mulin held her down. His face was dark. "Bai Shuali, your voice is similar." Bai Shuali glared at the man in front of her and then took off his glasses. She was stunned. Yi Mulin's face was cold. "I'll break your legs if you drink again." Chapter 30-71. Yi Mulin stopped her instinctively. Bai Shuali widened her eyes and pointed at her lips, but they still didn't have a tacit understanding. In the end, she vomited all over his body and the car, and the sour smell was everywhere. Yi Mulin wanted to strangle her after vomiting. Bai Shuali sobered up a little, but she knew how to play dumb. Yi Mulin had been a noble since he was a child, so how could he stand such a smell? With a dark face, he asked the chauffeur to drive the car to the car wash. He took off his coat and threw it into the garbage bin, then carried his wife to a hotel nearby. In the 5-star presidential suite. When they arrived at the suite, he threw her on the carpet and rushed to take a shower. As he showered, he gritted his teeth, thinking about how to deal with her when he came out. When he came out, he put on a white bathrobe and walked over. His wife was lying on the floor, hugging a pillow in her hands, obviously asleep. He kicked her, but she didn't move, still lying on the floor like a dead pig. She didn't sleep well and was snoring. Yi Mulin snorted and ignored her. He walked to the sofa in the living room, sat down and turned on the TV. After watching for a while, the The pig with the surname Bai was still lying there, motionless. He pretended not to see it and didn't think about it. After watching for a while, he heard a voice from the other side, "I'm thirsty." The eldest son of the Yi family turned off the TV and walked over to stand in front of her. He looked down at her and said coldly, "Aren't you very capable?"
Continue to drink.
Bai Shuali opened her eyes, and her black eyes opened a slit. To be honest, she was usually beautiful, and he was used to seeing all kinds of beautiful women, so he wasn't very tempted. He just felt that her body was very good when he did that thing at night. He wasn't tempted by anything else, but he disliked her for being so superficial. But when she looked at him with her eyes open, he felt that she was a little cute, like some kind of small animal, a little pure. He squatted down and pulled her hair. "Do you want to drink water?" She still looked at him like that and said honestly, "I want a drink." His face immediately darkened again. Originally, he wanted to leave, but that shallow, shameless woman actually moved her head over and forcefully placed it on his lap, as if she was acting coquettishly. Yi Mulin's face was cold. "What are you doing?"
Thirsty.
Her voice was coquettish as she moved her face closer. "Or I'll kiss you and drink your saliva." His expression became even more unsightly as he said in disdain, "The stench is overwhelming."
Don't even think about it.
Bai Shuali didn't care about his disgust and kissed him. Of course, it didn't smell good, but the eldest son of the Yi family, who was born with a slight obsession with cleanliness, didn't push her away and let her kiss him for a long time. After a long time, he said with a cold expression, "Are you done kissing?" She giggled and rolled in his arms. After a while, she moved closer to his ear and said warmly, "I don't want to eat anything else." "Yi Mulin, why are you so excited?" His body stiffened, and he pushed her away. He also saw his sorry state. He actually had a reaction to a filthy, smelly woman. He must be crazy. Bai Shuali was lying on the floor, gnawing on her little finger. "It's only been one night, and you're already suffocating? Yi Mulin, you're a pervert." His expression was very ugly. He wanted to kick her a few times, but he really wanted it. After weighing the pros and cons, he picked her up and walked to the bathroom. Chapter 30, 272. He carried her back to the bathroom and turned on the faucet while pressing her head down. And he was washing her with cold water, not caring about her life at all. Bai Shuali was clear-headed for a moment. She felt that if she believed that he loved her now, she would be out of her mind. He was clearly a despicable tyrant. He would never be gentle to her and would only hit her. He would only use violent methods to treat her. Why did she think that he liked her just a little bit just because of a stupid necklace? A stupid necklace that didn't even have $100,000? Bai Shuali screamed, "Yi Mulin, I hate you the most. Let go of me." Yi Mulin sneered and continued, "Bai Shuali, I hate drunkards too. I hate them very much." He didn't show any mercy to her. He washed her with cold water and washed her hair several times with shampoo. He also applied shower gel on her body and forced her to brush her teeth twice. She had to admit that Yi Mulin was a man with a sense of ceremony. He was so hairy that it made one's hair stand on end. When Bai Shuali was thrown onto the bed, she tore off the necklace on her neck and revealed her original face. She shouted, "Yi Mulin, I'm so pretty and I have a rich family. Do you think that I'm worthless after spending less than $100,000 on you?" She hugged him immediately. "Do you think I'm that worthless?" She didn't want to listen to him. She resisted fiercely. Yi Mulin pressed her down and bit the back of her ear. He said angrily, "Bai Shuali, do you think you're for sale?" She bit her lip and looked at him provocatively. "Yes, I like to sell. It's too cheap. I won't sell it." She curled up and looked like she wasn't going to cooperate. Actually, he could have used brute force. Her little strength was nothing to him. But Yi Mulin didn't want to do that. He pressed her down with one hand and took out a diamond ring from his pocket with the other. It was so big that it sparkled and sparkled. It was so cute. Bai Shuali's eyes lit up. She reached out to take the ring and put it on her finger. She looked at him with sparkling eyes. "You bought it for me?" Yi Mulin sneered. Not for you. It's for sex. Bai Shuali was still admiring the jawbone in her hand. She loved it so much that Yi Mulin was furious. He frowned and glared at her fiercely. Shallow. She wrapped her arms around his neck and exhaled. Lawyer Yi, you've used a ring worth tens of millions to buy sex, and you still have the nerve to say that I'm shallow. He glared at her, trying to be as rude as possible. She had always been rebellious, but tonight, she was more crazy and indulged him. Because of the big diamond ring. For the entire night, the eldest son of the Yi family pinched his wife and said harshly, "You shallow woman." But no matter how much he hated her, he still pressed her down again and again, as if he wanted to earn back the money from the ring. This hateful woman. He obviously hated her. He obviously despised her for being superficial and lacking in substance. Any random woman by his side would be much better than her, but he had married her. Yi Mulin spent the whole night tormenting her and only let her go when the sun rose. Bai Shuali felt that he must be crazy. Also, he didn't use protection. Would they have a child? But she was floating and sinking. Not only was she tortured, she was also bewitched by him. She forgot to remind him to wear it. She even thought that if she was really pregnant, she should just give birth. Chapter 32-73. Bai Shuali didn't wake up until noon. When she woke up, Yi Mulin was not on the bed, but his phone was on the bedside, which meant that he didn't leave. When Bai Shuali sat up, she felt that her whole body was about to break, especially her waist. She cursed him, then looked at the diamond ring on her hand, feeling that the ring wasn't so cute anymore. She worked hard for a whole night to get the money. She put on a bathrobe, walked into the bathroom, and brushed her teeth with her eyes closed. She inadvertently looked up and saw herself in the mirror. Strawberries all over. Her neck was full, and so was her mouth. She looked at her legs and waist. All of them. This pervert. Bai Shuali was going crazy. She had trypophobia. His mother's. She didn't dare to look at herself in the mirror, for fear of being scared. She closed her eyes and ran back to the bedroom to take his phone. She vented her anger on the phone, but it didn't vent her anger. At this time, she heard Yi Mulin's voice from the study room. She thought he was calling from a landline, so she didn't think too much. She didn't have the brain capacity to think too much. She pushed open the door of the study room. She was stunned when the door was opened. It was his subordinates Chi-Chi and a dozen of them. It seemed like they were having a meeting. Her mind was in a mess because she was only wearing a bathrobe and had no shoes on her feet. She was barefoot. She looked at Yi Mulin's eyes. His expression was very strict. Get out. Bai Shuali was stunned. Although he was usually fierce to her, it was only in private. Now, he treated her like this in front of his subordinates. Damn it. Maybe she felt wronged, or maybe she was too disappointed, so there were tears in the corner of her eyes. She had never cried like this before. And it was because of a man. He played with her the whole night last night, and now he was treating her like that kind of woman. She bit her lips and ran out quickly. Then, there was a banging sound like someone was packing something, or more like someone was smashing something. Yi Mulin was still calm. The ones who weren't calm were his subordinates. They looked at each other and didn't know what to do. Li Mi, Yi Mulin's secretary, saw that Mrs. Yi was not only covered with love bites, but also delicate feet and a huge ring on one of her fingers, tens of millions. She screamed in her heart. It would be a lie to say that boss didn't like Madam. If he didn't like her, why would he think like this? It was obvious that his boss was infatuated with her. He could just give her a check and go and pick one himself. Thinking about it, it was normal for even a shallow worm to fall in love with such a beautiful body of flesh. After being interrupted by Bai Shuali, the meeting couldn't go on. Everyone's mind was filled with the kiss marks on Lawyer Ye's wife's body. The way they looked at Yi Mulin was more ambiguous. Yi Mulin said calmly, "Let's continue in the office in the afternoon." After dismissing his subordinates, he went to deal with his little wife. But when he walked into the master bedroom, she was gone. She even childishly soaked his phone in the bathtub. There were also a few words written in lipstick on the mirror. Yi Mulin, I hate you. He wiped it with a tissue and snorted coldly. Childish. Shallow. He fished the phone out of the water, took out the card, and threw the phone into the trash can. He wanted her to pay for it. It was a lesson so that she would not develop the habit of throwing things around. Chapter 30, 274. Yi Mulin didn't go back to the office immediately. Instead, he went back to the old house first. But on his way back, he wondered what she had worn. After returning to the Yi family's mansion, he knew that his wife, the young lady of the Bai family, and the young madam of the Yi family had gone out in the hotel's bathrobe. Because of this, the hotel had even blacklisted her. Yi Mulin walked into the mansion with a dark face. Mother Yi was a little hesitant. Mulin, Shueli just came back. The eldest brother of the Yi family could imagine what his wife was like when she came back today. His mother was born in a noble family and had always been decent. She probably had never seen such a shocking thing, so he spent some time to comfort his mother. I was with Shueli last night. She's probably a little angry now. Mother Yi was relieved. I see. In fact, as a mother, she shouldn't say it, but Mother Yi really wanted the best for her son. She took her son aside and whispered, Mulin, Shueli likes to play. You should spend more time with her and tie her heart to you. Yi Mulin frowned. Tie her heart to him?
It was almost the same as the money tied to him.
Last night, when she saw the diamond ring, her whole body was shining. She had never been like a dead fish lying on the bed waiting for him to do anything to her. But at this moment, thinking of the beautiful scenery last night, the eldest brother of the Yi family unconsciously pulled his tie and coughed. I'll go upstairs first, Mom. Mother Yi smiled. Go ahead. Yi Mulin went upstairs slowly. When he reached the master bedroom on the second floor, he opened the door and saw his new wife lying on the bed. She was still wearing the bathrobe from the hotel. What was worse was that the indoor slippers were also from the hotel, and her hair was messy and out of shape. Yi Mulin sat down and pulled her hair gently. His face was dark. You ran home after doing something bad, didn't you? Bai Shueli ignored him and pulled her hair back. She glared at him and turned her back. Yi Mulin paused for a moment. Then, he flipped her over and pinned her down with his body. She couldn't escape and scolded angrily. Yi Mulin, you bastard. She stretched out her feet and kicked him. Let go, let go. He was as still as a mountain. One could imagine how much weight a man had when he weighed 145 kilograms on a body that weighed less than 100 kilograms. Plus, he had the natural stamina of a man. Yi Mulin's gaze was extremely deep. Are you always this unreasonable when you encounter things? Bai Shueli's eyes were red, her nose was red, and her lips were red. She glared at him. I'm being unreasonable. Yi Mulin, you didn't give me face in front of so many people, and you still want me to be reasonable? She couldn't move her body, so she kicked him again. Let me go. I want to divorce you. As soon as she finished speaking, she was shocked to find that his eyes had become much deeper. Yi Mulin squinted at her and sneered. What about after you divorce me? Are you going to find a soft-footed shrimp to take over? Or are you going to find Mubai? Let me tell you, it's impossible for Mubai. He has no reason to use second-hand goods that I used. Bai Shueli was infuriated. She glared at him, tears welling up in her eyes from the humiliation. Yi Mulin continued to sneer. Find a soft-footed shrimp and give you a lot of money to spend while you spend your time outside. How shameless do you think you are? How much youth do you have for a man to spoil you endlessly? Chapter 30, 275. Yi Mulin chuckled. Oh, your dad? Bai Shueli Riceworm. What other good points do you have other than your surname is Bai? Bai Shueli was furious. He started to look down on her again. Why should he look down on a riceworm? She had to be capable to be a riceworm. She had good reincarnation skills and was pretty. Weren't those good points? She bit her lips and glared at him. If I didn't take care of myself so well, would you have hugged me for the entire night if my surname was Bai? She said it fiercely. However, She felt that when she said that, a certain part of her husband's body seemed to have stirred up. She got even angrier. He always said that she was shallow and a rice worm. Why didn't he say that he was a silver rod and that he was a worm head? Although Yimulin wanted it, he was angry now. If he hugged her and did it, she would be spoiled. He stared at her and said in a low voice, "So, you're not giving birth and you're in the right? Why am I not giving birth?" She snorted and asked, "Do you think I don't put in enough effort every night?" Her self-righteous look made Yimulin laugh. He let go of her and leaned on the side of the bed. He looked like he was in deep thoughts. He then reached out to curl her hair. She didn't want to pull back, so he grabbed her hair and played with it. It was like a little boy bullying a little girl in kindergarten. Bai Shuali was angry. She didn't want to be entangled with him. She sat up and wanted to run. However, he caught her and continued to be in a daze. "Yimulin, is your law firm closed down? Is that why you have nothing to do?" She scolded. He glared at her. After being in a daze for a while, he suddenly chuckled and looked much more relaxed. "You're right, you're giving birth." As he said that, he even patted her little face. Bai Shuali felt goosebumps when he treated her so nicely. It scared her even more than when he was fierce. Yimulin lowered his body and buried his face in her ears. "When did you get pregnant? This is called giving birth. Do you know that, rice worm?" "Don't call me rice worm," she shouted angrily. No one had ever dared to treat her like this. This husband in name, there were scenes of rape, domestic violence, and everything else. Actually, how was this domestic violence? He clearly liked to do it with a heavy taste. Did he think that she didn't know? "Pervert, why didn't you change your bad habits?" When she shouted like this, the atmosphere froze. "Full of bad habits?" he repeated. Bai Shuali was a little scared. She curled up at the head of the bed. She was afraid he would beat her. He had really hit her before. In the first few months of their marriage, he had hit her a few times. Although it didn't hurt her, it hurt a lot. She didn't like it at all. First take her, then take her. She also felt humiliated. She really wanted a divorce, but she knew very well in her heart that if her father did not agree, even if Yimulin was willing to sign, it would be useless. Her surname was Bai, but the wealth that came with this surname was not easy to enjoy. The burden on her body made it impossible for her to choose the life she wanted. Unless she was willing to change her surname. However, she was a rice worm. Her surname was not Bai, so what else could she do? Would she still be able to live well? Bai Shuali was a little stunned. Suddenly, she smiled helplessly. "Yimulin, you're right. I'm a rice worm." Chapter 30, 276. Yimulin looked at her lying there. To be honest, she was very seductive and beautiful. However, he didn't see her soul. At least, Bai Shuali didn't have a soul at that moment. Yimulin's eldest brother slapped her in the face and said coldly, "It's noon. Do you want me to do why in the daytime?" Bai Shuali got up immediately and stared at him. "Yimulin, you've done it in the daytime before, haven't you?" He looked at her and chuckled. "Are you begging me to do it with you?"
"No."
Bai Shuali was hit for the second time that day. She got up immediately. "I didn't." In order to make her words sound more convincing, she stared at him and bit her lip. "Actually, your technique is really bad." She lowered her voice. "You made me hurt so much. You're a rookie." As a man, it was a very serious thing to be questioned in this aspect. Yimulin reached out to hold her chin and asked her seriously, "Did it hurt these few times?" He asked in a very focused and strict tone, as if he was in an office. She didn't know why, but Bai Shuali blushed. She stared at him. "I don't know." "You don't know whether it hurt or not, huh?" He chuckled again. "Do you want to try again?" "You'll probably know." She opened her eyes wide. "You said no just now." Yimulin's face changed instantly. He dragged her up. "That's right. I have work to do in the afternoon. It's really not suitable for me to be in bed with you for too long." After that, he dragged her to the bathroom mirror and made her look at herself in the mirror. She didn't dare to look at that ambiguous body. "Shallow worm. Do you think it's wrong for me to be fierce to you?" Yi Mulan looked at the decadent body in the mirror and said with a hoarse voice, "Do you think it's appropriate for you to take a taxi home wearing a hotel bathrobe? How many lives do you think you have?" His voice was getting more and more serious. "Do you think you're wronged?" Bai Shueli bit her lip. "It's you who made me like this. Did I do it myself? You think you're in the right?" He assumed the posture of a superior. "Go take a bath and wash your bathrobe. I'll take you to return it to her later. Also, did you do something bad?" As he spoke, he held her chin, looking as if he would break her neck if she dared to lie. Bai Shueli didn't dare to make a sound. "Buy me a cell phone later," he said simply. Bai Shueli immediately cried out, "You're making things difficult for me. Can't you buy it yourself?" He turned around and glared at her. She didn't dare to say anything. Compared to being beaten up, this kind of punishment was still acceptable. Bai Shueli went into the bathroom to take a shower. When she came out, she looked at the most advanced laundry equipment and said confidently, "I don't know how to wash." The eldest brother of the Yi family was smoking. He came over with a cigarette and glanced at her. "What else can you do?" Bai Shueli said righteously, "To eat, drink, and be merry." He stared at her for a long time, then put away the cigarette butt. "Come here, I'll teach you." She was frightened. She stepped back in the bathrobe and refused instinctively. Yi Mulan sneered, "Bai Shueli, the Yi family washes their own clothes by themselves. Who do you think washed your clothes these days? When I'm at home, I wash them by myself. When I'm not at home, my mother washes them for you. Don't you think it's shameful that you can't wash clothes at the age of 20? Chapter 30, 277. Bai Shueli stared at him for a long time before she asked softly, "Did you wash my underwear too?" Yi Mulan snorted. "What else?" Her face turned red and she stared at him. "Yi Mulan, you are shameless. Bai Shueli, you have lived for so long and you don't even know how to wash clothes. Do you think you are shameless?" He snorted coldly. She was still staring at him. Yi Mulan's voice softened a little. "You are not bad now. You used to be in the Bai family, but you are not allowed to be a shallow riceworm here." "Why do you add the word shallow in front of riceworm?" "Yi Mulan, you despise women. Your family is so rich. Why don't you let the servants wash? My hands will be rough when I wash clothes." "I don't wash them," she said matter-of-factly. Yi Mulan said coldly, "I wash them automatically and dry them. Your hands won't be rough. Besides, the people of the Yi family pay attention to privacy. They won't let outsiders touch their private things. Do you understand?" After he finished, Bai Shueli looked at him. "Then I am not an outsider, am I? You even wash my clothes for me." Yi Mulan's face darkened. "You are lazy. After you teach me, you not only have to wash your own clothes, but you also have to wash my clothes for me."
Why? She was angry.
Why did she have to marry him? She could live a luxurious life, but she had to be a maid? Her lawyer husband sneered, "Because you are a shallow rice worm who can't produce." Bai Shueli was so angry that she said without thinking, "Then I am pregnant." Yi Mulan stared at her with a trace of amusement in his eyes. She was even angrier and shouted, "I don't have to wash clothes if I am pregnant, right?" Yi Mulan reached out and knocked on her head. He snorted, "Bai Shueli, you are so ambitious." He walked forward and snorted, "A rice worm is a rice worm." Bai Shueli was angry. "Then will you make me pregnant?" At this time, the eldest son of the Yi family had walked to the washing machine. When he turned on the power, he looked at her thoughtfully. Millet Worm was a little nervous, waiting for his answer in a daze. Yi Mulan's voice was very slow. "If I remember correctly, you wanted to divorce me before, and now you want to get pregnant. Bai Shueli, you want to have a child and raise it yourself?" "Of course not," Riceworm stammered. "I was just thinking that if life is so hard, you might as well lie down and enjoy it." The Yi clan's eldest brother's face darkened. "Your analogy is really unique. Humor has always been my specialty," Bai Shueli said shamelessly, then looked at him. "What do you think?" Yi Mulan threw her bathrobe and the clothes he had changed out of. They were entangled together, and then he said coldly, "But I only want to rape you. I don't want you to enjoy it. What a pervert. Bai Shuali was furious. I've sacrificed so much and you don't even let me enjoy it? His gaze suddenly became unpredictable and dangerous. He leaned forward and said in a low voice, "Then tell me, do you enjoy lying in bed every night?" Bai Shuali immediately stuttered and looked at Yi Mulin. "No, I didn't." "If not, you are anxious to give birth to a child for me?" he said mockingly. She asked shamelessly, "Then can I still get pregnant?" The Yi clan's eldest brother seemed to be indifferent. "I haven't played enough." Chapter 30, 278. After saying that, Bai Shuali regretted it. As expected, the eldest son of the Yi family was scared. "Do you think I'm old?" She didn't say no, but just whispered, "That's how it is." Yi Mulin's voice was calm. "Do you think your focus is what I'm playing with?" With the intelligence of the worm, she had to think for a long time to figure it out, but this time, the worm understood it instantly. She stared at him. "Yi Mulin, can you respect a woman?" "A woman?" He looked at her indifferently. "Apart from your appearance, do you have any self-awareness of a woman? You're obviously a worm without a gender." She couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to run away, but a strong hand quickly grabbed her wrist. He held her tightly and pulled her into his arms. She was immediately surrounded by his body temperature. His chin rested on her hair, and his voice was very soft and even a little gentle. "Study hard and strive to be a good student among the worms." Bai Shuali could tell that he treated her as a little toy, an object for him to play with. She hated it. She had to warm the bed at night, and her body was ruined by him. During the day, he still wanted to ruin her mentally. Did he think that giving her a diamond ring was a big deal? She wanted to get angry, but his hand that was grabbing her wrist moved to her waist. He didn't do anything but hugged her from behind. Bai Shuali originally wanted to resist, but strangely, she suppressed her thoughts and her little hand slowly dropped down. She looked at the washing machine, which was fully automatic, but she couldn't understand anything. All her thoughts were on the body of flesh and blood behind her. It was warm, strong, and strong. She remembered every bit of his strength. Bai Shuali felt dizzy. She not only didn't want to resist the rape in life, but she even had a feeling that she wanted to rape him. As soon as this thought came out, she was shocked and her body naturally hit back. Yi Mulin groaned in pain and then snorted coldly. "Bai Shuali, you know everything?" She was also shocked, and then she stuttered and asked him, "Know what? Do you know how to have children?" Yi Mulin picked her up and put her on the washing machine. He crossed his arms in front of him and looked at her coldly. "I really want to open your head and see if it's full of protein." "Shouldn't it be brain matter?" she asked awkwardly. She didn't dare to come down and just sat there like a primary school student being scolded. Actually, it wasn't that she was stupid, but because he was always hugging her, she was distracted. The eldest brother of the Yi clan snorted. "A worm is also a worm. It should be a high-protein animal." Bai Shuali was furious. "Yi Mulin, you can insult my physique, but you can't insult my character. Is there anything else on your body that I can insult?" he said mockingly. "Bai Shuali, you're willing to give birth to my child just so you don't have to wash my clothes.
Can you still have some backbone?"
She stared at him with tears in her eyes. She knew that he was looking down on her again. She wanted to cry, but she held it in. Then, she bit her lip. "Didn't you say my worm? Where are the bones?" After saying that, he was really angry. He sat there without saying a word and hung his head. That beautiful European face had the dejected look of an 8-year-old girl. It was funny and infuriating at the same time. Yi Mulin wanted to say a few more words to her, but he didn't expect that she would actually cry. Her tears fell one by one, and they were the size of beans. Her skin was sensitive, and soon, her face was covered with tears. Chapter 30, 279. Yi Mulin stared at her tear-stained face, and then at her tear-stained face. However, he still kept a straight face. "Do you cry when something happens?" She lowered her head and bit her lips. "Yes, I cry." Then, she stared at him as if she had gathered her energy. "Bite me if you're not happy?" The eldest son of the Yi family was stunned. He probably didn't expect her to be so unreasonable when she was crying. Couldn't this woman act coquettishly a little? What a waste of her face. His face darkened. Then, he moved closer to look at her eyes. They were red like a little rabbit that had been bullied. Yi Mulin reached out his hand to rub her cheeks. She started crying again. Yi Mulin stared at her eyes. Finally, he bit her soft cheek. It was soft and tender. He had never done this before. But the taste was not bad. He looked up after only one bite. His voice was extremely hoarse. "I've bitten you already." She was in a daze. After a long time, she finally came to her senses. "I've cried. How dare you bite me?" Her words were full of disbelief. Yi Mulin smiled gently. He reached out and rubbed her face. "Didn't you ask me to bite you?" She stared at him with red eyes.
You bullied me.
"Yes, I bullied you. Why did you bite me?" There was an obvious smile in his words. Bai Shuali knew that he was up to no good. However, she was unwilling to give up. She gritted her teeth and bit his face. She looked into his eyes. "I bit you too." She looked as if she was saying, "What can you do to me?" Yi Mulin looked down. At this moment, their faces were touching. She could see how long his eyelashes were. It seemed to be 1 centimeter long. It was very beautiful. Yi Mulin beautiful? Bai Shuali wanted to step back. However, a hand pressed the back of her head. It was strong and warm. She was shocked. Her body trembled unconsciously. He moved forward slowly and was stuck in the middle of her body. It was very shameful. Her lips were still on his face. Her eyes were wide open. Yi Mulin turned his face and slowly rubbed her lips. The feeling of the pores rubbing against the lips was very slight. Only those who had kissed her would know. Finally, his lips touched hers lightly. He didn't kiss her immediately. Instead, he just pressed his lips against hers and stared into her eyes. "Is it bullying if I kiss you now?" Her entire body was trembling, and her eyes were wide open. Every time he said a word, his lips would brush against hers, swaying back and forth. She had never experienced such a feeling before. Her entire body felt like it was being electrocuted, and if it went any further, she would die from not being able to take it. He couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Her fair neck slid a little because of this. Yi Mulin immediately decided to give up on her lips and kissed her wet lips instead. When he did this, Shirley Bai stirred uncomfortably and kicked him with her little foot, nearly falling off. He wrapped one arm around her waist and held her in place. His thin lips nibbled on her neck and kissed her artery. It was like a feather, but also like warm water, surrounding her and then stirring up raging waves. Bai Shuali bit her lips. She felt uncomfortable but longed for it. She hugged his black head and pulled his hair. It was so painful, but he didn't seem to care and continued to kiss her. After a long time, he finally had enough. He moved his lips to hers and chuckled. "Now I'm going to do it for real." Chapter 30, 280. She opened her eyes wide and stared at him. Under her gaze, Yi Mulin kissed her lips gently. While she was in a daze, he opened her mouth effortlessly. Their lips and teeth entangled. She didn't have time to savor it and could only stare at him blankly. At this time, Yi Mulin's eyes were closed. His expression was intoxicated, and every line of his face was filled with tenderness. Was this the man who was violent, who would spank her at the slightest provocation? Also, what was with the electric current in her body? How could she have feelings for a man who despised her and called her a worm all day long? No, it couldn't be. The kiss was finally over. After Yi Mulin kissed her, he looked at the stunned little girl and calmed down. "Have you learned it?" she exclaimed. "Kiss?" He slapped her butt. "I'm talking about washing clothes." She was stunned and said after a long time, Shouldn't we kiss?" He moved his face closer to her and asked in a very low voice, "Do you want to kiss me?" Bai Shuali shook her head fiercely.
No.
She stared at him again. "You scoundrel." His fingers were still gently rubbing the back of her head. He smiled faintly. A scoundrel doesn't know how to coax a crying little girl. Bai Shueli's eyes widened again. You coax me? You don't cry now, do you? He was unbelievably gentle, both in his voice and expression. The little worm was really coaxed by him. She was embarrassed, and her whole body was overflowing with love. Her face suddenly turned red. Just when she wanted to speak, he slapped her again. Do you know how to wash clothes? She shook her head and said with a voice like a mosquito, No. So stupid. He carried her down and smiled faintly. I don't know how you became my wife. The little worm was angry. He was the one who forced her. She looked down and didn't say anything. Her eyes were red. Don't cry. If you cry again, I won't kiss you. I'll beat you, he said in a good mood. Bai Shueli was angry, but didn't dare to say anything. She could only silently bite her lips beside him. Yi Mulin set the washing machine to automatic drying mode and explained to her how to operate it. 3 times in a row, he asked her if she knew how to do it, and she said no. Yi Mulin crossed his arms in front of him and stared at her. Bai Shueli, what is your brain made of? Don't you think you're IQ? Divorce me if I'm stupid, she whispered, glancing cautiously at him again as she spoke. He hung his head again. Her expression made him both angry and amused. In Yi Mulin's world, almost everyone was an elite. There was no need to talk about his father. His mother came from a prestigious family and was proficient in the 4 arts. She was also good at washing clothes. Although Mu Bai was in the entertainment industry, he was very talented in music. Not many people knew about this. He was also a well-known writer behind the scenes. He didn't have many friends, but all of them were accomplished people. A worm like this, was it really produced by the Bai family? He remembered that her cousins were all extraordinary. Yi Mulin suddenly sneered. It's not easy to be this stupid. Her eyes widened. Are you laughing at me? It's obvious, isn't it? His face darkened. Should I be glad that you can understand me? Bai Shueli was furious. She only said one sentence. Divorce me if you don't like me. Who was the one who hugged and kissed me just now? Chapter 30, 281. Yi Mulin looked at her and smiled faintly. Don't you know that all men are lustful? She ignored him and wanted to pull away, but he easily held her back with one hand. His voice was a little hoarse. You haven't even learned how to wash clothes and you want to run away? Bai Shueli glared at him. Wash it again for me to see. He looked at his watch and frowned, looking impatient. Bai Shueli, do you think everyone has as much time as you do? She looked at him. Then, what do you want? He didn't say anything and took out the dry clothes. There was a bathrobe and a few of her undergarments. Bai Shueli blushed when she saw his tan skin guarding her cuties. She snatched them away. I'll put them away myself, he said hoarsely from behind her. Change your clothes and come out with me. Bai Shueli turned around abruptly. I want to stay at home and rest. Yi Mulin glared at her. She lowered her head. Tired. His face darkened. You threw my phone into the water. Shouldn't you compensate me with one? Go buy it yourself. She glared at him. However, Yi Mulin just looked at her. In the end, she still gave in. After changing her clothes and going downstairs, Mama Yi was already eating, and Yi Mulin had a bag in his hand, which contained the bathrobe from the hotel. Seeing her coming down, Mama Yi stood up and said with a smile, Mulin said he would take you to dinner, so I won't keep you. Have fun. Bai Shueli wanted to vomit. He was really shameless. He clearly wanted her to pay for his phone. He was stingy and sharp-tongued, but he still had the cheek to look down on her every day. After complaining, Bai Shueli replied to Mama Yi with a fake smile, Mom, I will. Mama Yi smiled happily. Good girl. By the way, don't be stingy when you go out. As Mama Yi thought about it, she went straight to her room and took out a card for her. There's 10 million in here. It's all given to me by the brothers. You can use it to buy whatever you like. If it's not enough, you can ask me for more. The password is the last few digits of the card number. Bai Shueli's eyes lit up. Thank you, Mom. After that, she held Yi Mulin's arm. Then we'll leave first. Mama Yi saw them off with a smile. When they got into Yi Mulin's car, she waved the card. This is enough to buy 10 phones. His mobile phone was custom-made and cost a few 100,000 yuan. Now, his mother had given him 10 million yuan. Just thinking about it made him happy. However, she was only happy for a short while before the card in her hand was confiscated by someone. Give this to me, for safekeeping. Bai Shueli cried out. What right do you have to deprive me of my right to be a rice worm? I've worked so hard as a daughter-in-law of the Yi family. You can't just not give me any benefits, can you? Yi Mulin slowly put the card into his pocket and looked at her deeply. You work the hardest at night. Didn't I give you pocket money? She glared at him. Mom gave it to me. Chapter 32:82. Let's buy it together later. Yi Mulin said lightly. She emphasized, I want to spend 10 million yuan. There was a red light in front of them. He tilted his head and looked at her. There was a touch of amusement in his eyes. Bai Shueli, don't you think about tomorrow? It's better to spend every penny you have, isn't it? She played with her fingernails. Aren't you the same? Why am I the same? Yi Mulin's voice was a little hoarse and his eyes were a little gentle, but she kept her head down and didn't see it. Bai Shueli still looked at the beautiful diamond ring on her finger and said slowly, Don't you spend every ounce of energy at night? With that, she looked up at him and stuck out her tongue at him. Yi Mulin's face darkened and he scolded, How can a girl talk about this kind of thing? She didn't say anything. He was a double standard. He wouldn't let her go during the day when he was in a good mood. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. She didn't know that even when he was scolding her, his eyes were also gentle. Yi Mulin went to the hotel first and returned the bathrobe. He also brought a small gift and forced Bai Shueli to apologize. They all knew Mr. Yi, the eldest son of the Yi family, and his wife was from the Bai family. They were all very prominent people. A bathrobe wasn't worth apologizing for. But Yi Mulin insisted. In the end, Bai Shueli was forced to say sorry reluctantly. After leaving the hotel and getting on the car, Riceworm was angry. Why do they have small gifts, but I never receive them? Yi Mulin was focused on driving and asked casually, Do you want the handmade cookies made by my mother or the diamond ring worth tens of millions? Although it was shameful, Miss Bai still said very honestly, Just choose the diamond ring. As soon as she finished her words, a bag of beautifully wrapped cookies was thrown into her arms. She was a little surprised and tilted her head to look at him. Yi Mulin still looked like an elite. Eat 2 less. Bai Shueli didn't care. If he said 2 less, she would eat 2 more. But she regretted it after a while because his car drove to a restaurant that she especially liked. Bai Shueli looked at the bag of cookies that she had eaten nearly 100 grams. She bit her lips and gritted her teeth. Yi Mulin, did you do it on purpose? You said you were hungry, and I told you to eat less, he explained kindly, but the expression on his face did not show that. She was furious, but there was nothing she could do about it. She decided to eat more later, even if she was stuffed. Just drink a few more bottles of his 1982 Lafite. They sat down and ordered. Bai Shueli ordered all the expensive dishes. A rough calculation showed that this meal would cost millions. Her heart wouldn't hurt him to death. Yi Mulin put down the aperitif glass and smiled. I forgot to tell you, this meal is on you.
Why?
She suppressed her anger and whispered, You want a woman to pay for a meal with you? Yi Mulin, you really have no morals. Of course, it's different from other women. But when I go out with my wife, the wife pays. That shows her status in the family, doesn't it? Bai Shueli was furious. He did it on purpose. Wasn't he implying that she wasn't as good as those stinky bitches out there? She really wanted to get up and leave, but she couldn't afford to lose face. Not long from this table was the archenemy that she had grown up with. She couldn't let others see her as a joke. So she said in a low voice, Can't you pay for a meal? Yes, but there's a condition. The Yi family's boss smiled. It depends on whether you're willing or not. Chapter 32:83. As soon as Yi Mulin finished speaking, Bai Shueli naturally thought of some kind of sport. For example, he wanted to play some special hobbies and wanted her to cooperate with him. So she blushed a little. Yi Mulin looked at his wife and saw her blush. He knew what was going on, but his face was still indifferent. What are you thinking about? He moved closer. Then the rice worm's face became even redder. She stammered. Where can I be thinking? Yi Mulin moved closer to her face and stared at her eyes. I mean, you will wash the clothes in the future. She opened her eyes wide. Wash by hand. Do you understand? His face was very, very close to hers, and his voice was extremely husky. Dirty underwear will affect your fertility. Don't you want a child? Fertility? Children? She bit her lips and looked around. She couldn't believe that he mentioned such a thing in such an elegant place. Wasn't he strict? On their wedding night, he could still talk about the marital agreement with her while doing it. Was he flirting with her now? Bai Shueli's eyes opened wide as she looked at the man in front of her. Are you stupid? He chuckled and returned to his elite look. I will wash it. She looked at him. If you don't pay the bill, I will put chili in your underwear. His eyes were deep. In that case, I will share it with you. Thinking of the process of sharing, her face was as red as chili. He looked at her and didn't speak again. The waiter also served the dishes. The rule of the Yi family was that no one could talk while eating, so the meal was peaceful. However, the 1982 raffle didn't open it. Yi Mulin asked directly, save it for me. The waiter said respectfully, yes, Mr. Yi. Bai Shueli was dissatisfied with the dessert after the meal. You save it to drink it on a date? Yi Mulin's eyes were a little unpredictable. He leaned back and smiled lightly. I don't have time to date with women. She stared at him. Then why are you sitting here eating now? Because you are my wife, he said pragmatically. And this is not a date.
It is you who are apologizing to me.
Besides, you need my permission to drink in the future. Otherwise, I will feed you chili water when you are drunk. Bai Shueli was furious. She had never seen such a rude, arrogant, and fierce man. What was wrong with her drinking a little? In the end, she was fucked to death by him, and now she was still trying to act innocent. She glared at him. Yi Mulin smiled faintly. So you have to be obedient. She was angry, but there was nothing she could do. When it was time to pay the bill, she was really angry. The man had eaten everything and walked straight out of the door. He had no intention of paying the bill. When they were outside, she still had to give him face. She hugged his arm and gritted her teeth. We agreed that this meal was on you. Yes, it's my treat. The eldest brother of the Yi clan nodded. So, pay the bill? She glared at him. At this time, the manager said respectfully, Mrs. Yi, Mr. Yi is the boss of our restaurant. You just need to keep the account. Bai Shueli glared at Yi Mulin. He glanced at her. Can we go now? She followed behind him, grinding her snow-white teeth. Yi Mulin, is it fun to tease me?
Yes.
He opened the car door and let her in, admitting it very simply. She continued to stare at him. She was so angry. He only knew how to tease her. Chapter 3284. She refused to get in the car. Yi Mulin, you're too despicable. With that said, she walked in the opposite direction. She wanted to go home, back to the Bai family. She did not want to live with such a despicable man anymore. In the past, it was domestic violence and rape. Now, he even made her do laundry and lied to her just for a meal. She did not want to be with him anymore. No matter how big the diamond ring was, she refused it. Not only that, she even plucked the ring off her finger and threw it at him. It landed on him, but Yi Mulin caught it and caught up with her in a few quick steps. She was still carrying him and ignoring him. Angry. Yi Mulin's voice had a hint of a smile in it. Bai Shueli turned around and said angrily, Yes, I'm angry. As she said that, she felt a little wronged and annoyed with herself. She said that she would turn around and leave, but when he tugged at her, she did not have that much confidence anymore. It was as though she could accept it if he coaxed her a little. Just as she thought that Boss Yi was going to apologize, he nodded his head in agreement. I'm relieved that you're angry. I'm happy now. Her European-style eyes were wide open like a goldfish, and she felt as though she was about to suffocate. She then lowered her head. "If you don't like me, we can just divorce." She looked as though her tears were about to fall. Yi Mulin knew that she was really angry, and his heart softened. Actually, he was just teasing her. She looked like she was usually very sensitive, but she really could not take a tease. He coughed gently. "All right, you cry so easily. It's fine now, but if you cry when you're a mother in the future, won't you laugh at me?" She raised her head and looked at him fiercely. "If I were to marry a Prince Charming, he would still coax me even when I'm 80 years old." His face was not gentle as he stared at her. "Just like Mubai?"
Yes.
She did not give him any face and admitted it directly. Yi Mulin laughed coldly and helped her put on the diamond ring roughly before saying with a cold face, "Mubai is gentle towards women, but he only wants to coax Lin Cece when she's 80 years old. He didn't even coax you when you cried when you were 8 years old." When Bai Shuali was 8 years old, her family background was not that prominent, and she cried a lot as well. He was annoyed to death because she chased after Mubai all day long, saying that Mubai was her Prince Charming. This made Yi Mulin, who was almost 20 years old at the time, very unhappy. Was he not handsome? That was why he felt that Bai Shuali was shallow. From then on, he wasn't interested in crybaby females. However, he still married her. She was still as disappointing as before. She still wanted to be around Mubai all day long. She still loved to cry, worshipped money, liked to drink, and did pole dancing. None of these fit the image of a woman in his heart. Even so, they still slept in the same bed every night. As soon as Yi Mulin finished speaking, she really burst into tears. In the parking lot, it was really a little ugly, the eldest brother of the Yi clan warned. "Bai Shuali, if you dare to cry again, I will spank your butt. If you hit me, I'll cry even harder. If you cry again, I'll rape you right here. As long as you're not afraid of being in the news." "You," he sighed, "didn't you say you were going to buy a bracelet?" Only then did the crybaby look up and blink her teary eyes. "Really? You're going to pay? And you're not allowed to use the money my mother gave me." He patted her face, not too lightly or too heavily. "I'll pay." His wife magically stopped crying. "You're willing to pay any amount." Chapter 32:85. She looked at him and said, "Pay for your phone too." Yi Mulin looked at her meaningfully. The crybaby said softly, "I'll pay for it, but don't expect me to buy those expensive ones. At most, I'll buy Apple's latest models." Yi Mulin smiled faintly. "Bai Shuali, I'm willing to pay for you." The word pay made her blush. She glared at him and got into the car without saying a word. She was stingy, anyway. She wouldn't buy him a phone that cost hundreds of thousands of yuan. Her mother used to say that men didn't need to wear good clothes. Girls would throw themselves at him, especially a young and promising man like Yi Mulin. She didn't know how many girls would throw themselves at him. The more she thought about it, the more scared she felt. She couldn't let him go out and attract girls. It didn't matter if he was gone, but he couldn't take his money out. Riceworm thought about it and felt that she couldn't let her husband dress up. She looked at the man beside her and hummed softly. Yi Mulin didn't know what she was thinking. He started the car and arrived at GM Square, the most luxurious place in V City. The first thing he wanted to see was the phone. Of course, Riceworm refused. If she bought him a phone that cost 10,000, he wouldn't be willing to pay. So she dragged him to a special counter and looked at the bracelet that she had been staring at for a long time. In fact, in the eyes of a straight man like Yi Mulin, these things all looked the same, especially when they were from the same brand. However, he did not know why these rich and powerful ladies would go all out to plant grass. They had to buy every one of them as if they were loyal fans of the brand. He looked at Riceworm's shining eyes looking at the bracelet and let out a long sigh. She seemed to know what he was thinking. Her gaze was still fixed on the bracelet, but her words were directed at him. "You don't understand. It's just like a man's shirt. It looks similar, but there are still differences." Yi Mulin looked at her and smiled coldly. "Are you very reasonable?" Am I crazy to reason with a lawyer? She stared at the bracelet and slowly put it on her hand. I'm just chatting. After putting it on, she took a deep breath. It's so beautiful. Then she hugged his arm. Hubby, isn't it beautiful? Please buy it for me. She was so old, but she still made a very cute face at him. The Yi clan's eldest brother actually despised him from the bottom of his heart, but there were many people watching from the side. She did it on purpose. I'm afraid he won't buy it. He smiled. You like it? She grunted in agreement. Yi Mulin raised his hand and looked at it. This won't do. Why? Rice Worm was about to explode, but he endured it with tears in his eyes. She had wanted to buy this for a long time. Yi Mulin looked at her and smiled. Change to another style. Not this one. She stubbornly wanted this one. In the end, Yi Mulin coughed softly. Because my wife has an identical one. Shirley, are you sure you want to buy the same one? She froze for a moment, then blinked. It took her 5 seconds to digest his words, and then she saw the strange expression on the shop assistant's face. Fuck, he did it on purpose. He misled people that she was a mistress. He was too hateful. Shirley had been spoiled since she was young. She lost her temper and took off the bracelet. I don't want it anymore. I blew on it the whole night last night, and I can't even bear to buy a bracelet. This time, the Yi clan's eldest brother's face darkened. Chapter 30, 286. He glared at his wife. Bai Shueli whispered, Buy it, and I will clarify it for you. He glared at her for a few seconds, and then said to the shop assistant, Wrap it up. After that, he squinted at her, meaning that she should clarify it. But Bai Shueli bit her fingers and smiled. Thank you, Mr. Yi. Let's continue to play tonight. As a result, he swiped the card and walked forward, ignoring her. Rice Worm was carrying a beautiful box. His hands, fingers, and neck were all shiny. It was really good to spend her husband's money. Although she was used to being extravagant in her mother's family, her father always scolded her for not being able to give birth, and she would get into trouble sooner or later. She didn't believe it. Hee. Wasn't she doing well now? Now Yi Mulin didn't beat her much, but he was a little fierce at night, and he liked to make her cry. But his skills were really good, and his genes were so good, and he thought she was stupid. He wouldn't allow her to ask about the baby, take care of the baby, study with the baby, and so on. At that time, wasn't she as happy as she was now? Bai Shueli suddenly found that there were many advantages to marrying the eldest Yi family. Except that he wasn't as gentle as Mu Bai, other disadvantages were simply advantages. For example, he was not interested in women, so he wouldn't give money to unrelated women. Another example, if he didn't have a woman outside, he would have the energy to take care of the baby. Thinking about Mu Bai, there were a lot of crazy fans outside. What if they hurt her irrationally? She thought about it and felt that it was better to adapt to reality. Besides, she had been played by Yi Mulin like this, so she wouldn't be so happy if she married again. For the sake of his bigger wallet, she would still firmly hold on to his wallet. As for washing clothes, if she didn't do it well, he wouldn't ask her to do it. Bai Shueli thought to herself shamelessly, her face full of righteousness. Yi Mulin was waiting for her at the elevator. She ran over and he pressed the button silently. Standing together, Rice Worm was about to say some flattering words. He said quietly, Didn't you say that you've been bragging all night? Let's start tonight.
What?
She looked at him in the mirror on the wall of the elevator with a frightened face. The eldest Yi family pinched her chin and smiled mysteriously. I'm looking forward to it. His eyes fell on her little mouth, and his slender fingers gently touched her velvety red lips. It was very warm. He leaned over and bent down to look her in the eye. His dark eyes looked into her big eyes. I heard that all men like this. I wanted to try it, but I was worried that you wouldn't let me. But since you're asking for it, I'll make a sacrifice. When he said that, she opened her eyes and squeezed out, You are shameless. He pinched her cheeks. Rice Worm, do you think my money is so easy to spend? Mu Bai and said, Yi Shueli. She immediately blushed. You
You?
You are, he sneered. Are you a roundworm in your stomach? He said, and shun. Moo. Li. He, I worm. S. If you don't like it, then divorce. Her voice suddenly lowered. The men who want to support me can line up from here to France. The French don't know the prestige of your family. He still sneered. In France, you're worth at most 200 yuan. Chapter 30, 287. She was furious. But how could she compete with a lawyer when it came to bickering? She decided not to say anything. With a cold expression, she followed him to buy a cell phone. She thought that he would buy an expensive custom-made phone, but he went straight to the Apple Experience store and picked 2 phones in 2 minutes. He raised his eyebrows and asked her to pay. Bai Shuali took the bill and complained, "Why do you want to buy 2? It's only 20,000. Do you still care?" His voice was indifferent. Riceworm gave in and went to line up with the bill. It was a phone store, so there were quite a lot of people. There was a long line of about 20 people in front of her. She was very impatient. If it was in the past, she would have asked the manager to clear the line. But now that Yi Mulin was here, she didn't dare to be arrogant. She didn't know when he was behind her. She turned around and glared at him, not saying anything. Then, her body leaned into a strong and warm embrace. He used his arm to support her. Riceworm was stunned. Riceworm was a little flattered. Damn, did Yi Mulin have a fever? Was that why he was so considerate? He leaned against her body and said softly, "Be natural. There was a pervert standing behind you just now." Bai Shuali's body froze. He thought she was scared. After a long time, she turned around and looked at him. "You mean he is now pointing a weapon at your butt, right?" His face darkened. "Then I'll move away and let you do it?" She screamed and quickly wrapped her arms around his neck.
No.
Yi Mulin lowered his eyes and looked at her, hugging his neck. She looked very dependent on him. His heart suddenly softened. Even if she had no good points, even if she was really full of shortcomings, he still felt that she was his wife when she hugged him like this. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead, waiting in line quietly. After paying, Riceworm automatically took out her wallet and swiped her card. Of course, it was the card that Yi Mulin gave her. Back in the car, he opened the package and put it directly into the card. Then, he took her phone and removed the card quickly. Bai Shuali was anxious. "Yi Mulin, what are you doing?" "My phone is studded with diamonds. It's worth hundreds of thousands. I don't want to use this. Keep a low profile. Don't ever use these superficial things again." He threw her cell phone accurately into the trash can outside. He had completely forgotten that the tens of millions of dollars she was wearing were all bought by him. Bai Shuali heard the sound of her heart breaking. Fuck, that little bit of good impression she had of him was gone in an instant. She reiterated that Yi Mulin was the most hated man in the world. There was no other. She was panting with anger, but he was in a good mood. When he started the car, he said calmly, "I still have a meeting to attend, so I'll go back to the company first. Let's go home tonight. You can catch up on your sleep in the afternoon. It seems that there are some promises that need to be fulfilled tonight." Bai Shuali bit her lips. "I've never seen anyone as shameless as you. Yi Mulin, I don't know how to brag. You don't know, or you don't want to blow it for me." His voice was calm and indifferent, as if he was talking about a case. "If you don't want to, we can look at the tutorial together. If you don't want to, I will persuade you. Or, do you prefer me to use force?" Riceworm banged on the window. "I want to get out. Yi Mulin, I want to divorce you." Chapter 30, 288. Bai Shuali took pictures for a long time, but no one paid attention to her. She was angry, but she was still angry. She glared at him, but her lawyer husband didn't care at all. Therefore, Riceworm got angry fiercely. "Yi Mulin, I won't brag. We discussed it just now." He looked at her sideways and gave her a comforting smile. "I will persuade you." She was still angry. When did they reach such a point? Riceworm thought in her heart that she wouldn't brag anyway. The boss of the Yi family glanced at her and smiled silently. When his car arrived at the law firm, The glittering signboard made her feel dizzy. She shrank in the car. I don't want to go up. I'll take a taxi home myself. Yi Mulin stared at her. Don't be stubborn. Get out of the car. She still stayed. In the end, he sighed. Do you want me to carry you up? Bai Shuili got out of the car and slammed the door. The boss of the Yi family didn't care too much and seemed to spoil her very much. When they arrived at the law firm, his secretary saw the legendary heroine first. She took a deep breath and then sent a message to her colleagues. The boss came to work with his wife. God, how loving they were. If it wasn't enough at night, they would come to make up for it during the day. Yi Mulin looked at his secretary with a warning. The little secretary didn't dare to say anything. She squeezed out a smile and coughed. Lawyer Yi, you have a guest. Yi Mulin paused. Do you have an appointment? No, but I think you will see her. The little secretary's expression was a bit complicated. It's Lawyer Ai Wei. If Lawyer Yi was said to be a rising star in B City's legal world, then Lawyer Ai Wei was the most successful Chinese lawyer in New York. Furthermore, she was beautiful and was also Lawyer Ye's junior. It was said that when they were in New York, they had a good relationship. Of course, no one dared to say this in front of Mrs. Yi, but for potential rivals in love, women were like agents. Their sense of smell was as sensitive as that of search and rescue dogs. Riceworm looked at the little secretary and then looked at Yi Mulin. No appointment. You won't see her, right? Yi Mulin's eyes fell on the little secretary and said lightly, Lawyer Ai, please come to my office. What about me? Bai Shuili's voice was low, with some grievance and anger that she didn't know. She knew that it was business, but she was also sure that there must be adultery outside of that. Yi Mulin's eyes moved to her face. He stared at her for a few seconds before he made a decision. Take a taxi back. Yi Mulin. She glared at him. What do you take me for? She dragged her tired body to accompany him to eat, to accompany him to buy a phone, and to accompany him to work. Now that there was a wild woman, he wanted to get rid of her.
She doesn't want to.
She wanted to see which vixen had designs on him. Very soon, she saw Lawyer Ai Wei. Ai Wei walked out of the guest room. She had a slender figure and was wearing a very fitting suit. Her hair was neatly tied up. Her whole body was wrapped up tightly, but she exuded a kind of advanced sexiness. She still had this little bit of aesthetic taste. She glared at the outsider and then at Yi Mulin. Are you sure you want to see her? You, and I made an appointment first. Yi Mulin's voice was a little hoarse. You mean what happened last night? She did not make a sound. Yi Mulin frowned. You go home first, I have something important to do. Listen to me. I won't listen to you. She was angry. You asked me to come. The eldest son of the Yi family would naturally not be manipulated by a woman, especially a worm. He said with a cold face, Secretarially, call the security over and ask Miss Bai to leave. Miss Bai? Bai Shuili's eyes became misty, but she did not cry. Instead, she raised her chin. Yes, my surname is Bai. I may not be worth 200 in France, but in B City, I'm not someone that you, Yi Mulin, can bully. She was so angry that she took off the ring, bracelet, and necklace that he gave her. She did not want them anymore, and threw them all at him. Yi Mulin, I announce that I don't want you anymore. Screw your domestic violence, screw your marriage agreement and your nonsense. Save it for other women. My surname is Bai, my name is Bai Shuili, and I'm also the Miss Bai that you mentioned. She tried her best to restrain herself. I'm not good, but I'm not begging you to marry me, and I'm not some Tom, Dick, or Harry that you can summon at your beck and call.
I've endured it for a long time.
I've never washed clothes, I've never arranged flowers, I've never made tea. Damn it, what kind of life have I been living since I married you? I hate this kind of life. Now I'm free. Let's be together with your auntie. I'll move a nest for you. She looked at Ai Wei again. Lawyer Ai, right? Congratulations, his family needs a nanny and Yi Mulin's exclusive prostitute. If you like her, you can have her. She was slapped when she finished her words. Yi Mulin slapped her. Apologize. His voice was strict. Chapter 30, 289. Never. She stared into his eyes. I'm Ms. Bai. Why should I apologize? She chuckled. Lawyer Yi, why aren't your bodyguards here yet? Are you going to throw me out yourself? His face was stern. Bai Xueli, there's a limit to how unreasonable you can be. She blinked. Am I being unreasonable? No, Yi Mulin, you've never treated me as your wife. I'm just a tool to please you. I'm superficial. I'm a worm that relies on others to survive. However, I don't need you to survive. She took a step back and said in a slightly choked voice, even if it's 200 yuan each time, it's still better than being by your side. After she said that, she used all her strength to slap him in the face. The sound of the slap was very clear. She said, I'm done. Yi Mulin didn't move. There were gasps all around. Oh my god, Lawyer Yi was hit. Ai Wei smiled. Yi, I'll come another day. You deal with your family matters first. Yi Mulin stared at Bai Xueli and said indifferently, no need. He raised his voice. Secretary Li, bring Lawyer Ai to my office. Secretary Li was still hesitant because she felt that Lawyer Yi was being unreasonable. They were newlyweds. They couldn't let Bai Xueli go just because Lawyer Ai came. They could talk in the small conference room outside. Moreover, it was better to put Bai Xueli in the secretary's office. Lawyer Yi was too chauvinistic. To put it bluntly, he was a male chauvinist. Moreover, Bai Xueli was in such a state now. Did he still want to see Lawyer Ai? After weighing the pros and cons, Secretary Li spoke up for Bai Xueli. Lawyer Yi, why don't we listen to Lawyer Ai? Yi Mulin's voice was cold. Didn't you hear what I said? Secretary Li gave Bai Xueli an apologetic look. Bai Xueli felt even sadder. Even a secretary sympathized with her. However, Yi Mulin had never considered her feelings. This woman called Ai Wei looked at him differently. Did he think she was blind? However, she, Bai Xueli, wasn't a love-struck man or woman. It didn't matter to her that he was like this. She took out the card he had given her from her purse and threw it in front of him. Then she took out the new phone that was the same as his. Her gaze landed on it and she still felt like crying, but in the end, she didn't cry. He removed the card and threw the phone to the ground.
Shatter.
Something scratched her face. It was very painful. She looked up with tears in her eyes. Yi Mulin, it's over. I've returned everything you've given me to you. If you're a man, then don't pester me. If you're a man, then remember how you treated me today. I, Bai Xueli, can find anyone, but I will never go back to you. With that, she chuckled softly and turned to leave. She walked very fast, and her shoes were very high. She twisted her ankle after only a few steps. It hurt a lot. She squatted down, pulled out her high heels, and walked forward without looking back. There were more than 10 men and women standing in the office, all of them looking at Bai Xueli with admiration. Because no one had ever dared to treat Lawyer Yi like this, to step on Lawyer Ye's face. However, it felt great. A smile appeared on Secretary Li's face. Lawyer Ai, please. Chapter 30-90. At this time, Bai Xueli had already walked to the door of the office. Yi Mulin's deep voice sounded. Don't you regret it? Whoever regrets is a bastard. She turned around, threw the shoes in her hand at him, and roared. The whole office was buzzing, and Yi Mulin's head was a little painful. He knew her character. She was shallow and she was a rice worm, but she was a member of the Bai family after all. She always had the courage to ignore everything. She said that she wanted to leave, and she said that it was a bastard to turn back. She really would. But he didn't want to spoil her like this. The women of the Yi family never had a temper, and they didn't allow her to have such a big temper. Why couldn't she be as understanding as his mother? There was nothing between him and Ai Wei for a long time, and Bai Xueli said such embarrassing words based on a little guess. He couldn't spoil her. But it was also a lie to say that he didn't feel anything at all. After all, she had thrown away all the things he gave her. He had specially picked out a phone of the same model, but she had mercilessly smashed it. Just like their marriage, It was probably nothing in her heart. The only thing she cared about was money. But there was a voice in his heart telling him that it wasn't like this. If she had liked his money, she wouldn't have been so angry today, and she wouldn't have fooled around here like a child. He picked up her jewelry, the card, and her high heels from the ground, and gave them to Secretary Gao. Find a paper bag for me to put them in. He thought that she was angry, but she would always go home. She didn't dare to go back to the Bai family. If she dared to ask for a divorce, her father would be the first to not let her go. Yi Mulan laughed at himself. What he was sure of was not the feelings, but the constraints behind her. In any case, he still cheered up and went to see Ai Wei. Ai Wei was the Chinese representative of a company in San Francisco, and behind him was a multinational company. The number of interests was very large, and Ai Wei was a very strong opponent, so he had to do his best. When he walked into the office, Secretary Li made him tea, looked at them carefully, and then left. Ai Wei sat on the single sofa and drank the tea very elegantly. Yi, you came in 2 minutes later than I expected. She raised her eyebrows. Is that your new wife just now? It's different from what I imagined. Yi Mulan sat opposite her and casually took a file. His voice was cold. Ai Wei, don't try to pry into anything. I'm not spying, I'm just sympathizing. Ai Wei chuckled softly. I remember when we were interning in New York, you hated hysterical women the most. You thought they were stupid. I didn't expect you to. She politely refrained from saying the rest. Yi Mulan's eyes were very cold. Lawyer Ai, you don't need to care about my personal affairs. Ai Wei changed the direction of her legs and her expression softened. Knight, I used to be your private matter. The past represents the past. His tone was indifferent. Let's begin. Ai Wei couldn't do anything about his unreasonable behavior, so they began to discuss the details. However, Yi Mulan was multitasking. Back then, why did he have a short relationship with Ai Wei? Because she was smart. Chapter 3291. At that time, he chose the most outstanding Chinese woman in the school to date. It only took him 3 days to get her to agree to date him. But he soon found that being with smart women was even more boring, because they were always self-righteous and boring. Yi Mulan and Ai Wei had only been together for 2 months. That was his limit, because he couldn't force himself to go further except for a light kiss, so he proposed to break up. This was a big blow to Ai Wei. For a long time, she hated him and regarded him as her strongest opponent. This was also boring for Yi Mulan because he never thought that personal feelings should be above reason. He felt that Ai Wei had lost her mind, but he never thought that it was because Ai Wei liked him. However, no matter how much she fought, they still became strangers who never interacted until now. Yi Mulan was a little lost in thought, and Ai Wei naturally saw it. She closed the document and said, "That's all for today." She stood up and said, "Yi, long time no see. Old classmate, do you want to take a shower?" He looked at her. Ai Wei smiled and said, "Are you afraid?" "Don't worry, Lawyer Yi, we know each other. You should have the heart to have a meal together, right? Or are you worried about your Mrs. Yi?" Yi Mulan lit a cigarette and said, "Give me the location, I'll go directly tonight." Ai Wei smiled lightly and said, "I'll send you a WeChat message. By the way, I don't have your WeChat yet." Yi Mulan let her scan it, but his eyes fell on the phone, and he was a little worried. He remembered that when they bought the phone together at noon, they were so good, but now they quarreled because of a small matter. He was a little confused and rubbed his forehead with his finger. Ai Wei scanned it and added it. "I'll send it over, I'll leave first." She left directly, leaving Yi Mulan alone in the office. His body sank deeply into the sofa, and he let out a long breath. His mind was in a mess, and it was full of the words that Riceworm said, "Yi Mulan, whoever turns back is a bastard." He sneered. She had a backbone. At this moment, Secretary Gao opened the door carefully. "Lawyer Yi, this is what you asked me to pack. It's all in this bag." Yi Mulan walked over and asked, "Is the broken phone in there too?" "Yes." Secretary Gao nodded. "It's all in there, but," she whispered, "the bracelet is broken." Yi Mulan was stunned. It wasn't because he couldn't bear to part with the money, but because he had a bad premonition. It was originally on by Xueli's hand, and now that it was broken, he had a bad feeling in his heart. He waved his hand to let the secretary go out. He took the thing and looked at it carefully, especially at the broken part. Beyond repair, Yi Mulin's heart felt like it was being pricked by a needle. It was painful and itchy. This unfamiliar feeling made him uncomfortable. He was a little repulsed. After a long time, he let out a long sigh and called his mother. Mama Yi had just finished her afternoon nap and immediately picked up the call. Mulin. Yi Mulin grunted. Mom, I won't be back for dinner tonight. Mama Yi thought that the young couple was romantic outside, so she didn't think too much about it. Instead, she said, Okay, I'll cook for one. Is Xueli back? Yi Mulin suddenly asked. Mama Yi felt strange. You didn't take her out? Chapter 30-292. Mama Yi nodded. Okay. She didn't think too much about it. She thought that Bai Xueli's phone was out of battery and her son couldn't be contacted. Yi Mulin hung up the phone and took a long drag on his cigarette. His phone rang and he immediately looked at it. It was the address that Bai Xueli had sent him. He threw his phone aside, not in the mood for anything. There were so many important things to do, but he still sat on the sofa and smoked. Later, he called Mu Bai and asked him if Bai Xueli was looking for him. Yi Mu Bai laughed. Brother, you're looking for a wife, and she came to me. Isn't it funny? Yi Mulin hung up the phone with a dark face. On the other end, Yi Mu Bai wanted to ask, but the call was cut off. He looked at the phone and snorted. What a bad temper. In fact, he could also see that big brother liked Xueli. If he didn't like her at all, why would he put her in the Yi family's mansion? If she didn't like it, they could just buy a villa and give her the money to raise her outside, maintaining the marriage on the surface. As long as Shirley didn't play too much, it would be fine. Big Brother was training Shirley to be the mistress of the Yi family, although in Yi Mu Bai's eyes, this was an impossible task. Xueli was a playful person. In fact, Big Brother could have just asked her some questions. Why did he have to make things difficult for her? Yi Mu Bai hung up the phone and dialed Secretary Li's number. After asking about the situation, he cursed. Miss Bai? Ask for security? Was his brother's brain full of pig feed? He could do whatever he wanted to Shirley at home, but it wouldn't be shameful if he closed the door. But in the outside world, men wanted face, but women didn't. Asking security to chase her away in front of so many people, especially his ex-girlfriend? Bai Xueli had been so proud since she was young. Now, she was about to be ground down by her big brother. But no matter how much she was ground down, she was still called Bai Xueli. Yi Mu Bai immediately sent a message to his brother. Brother, did Xueli call you a bastard? You're finished, just wait for the divorce. Yi Mulin frowned. Mu Bai really understood that worm. However, it was understandable. They were the ones who were innocent, while he was just a tortoise. The elder of the Yi family was very generous. He smoked in the office. The one called Wu Yan was so angry that he looked as if he didn't want anyone to get close to him. He also wanted to call Bai Xueli's cell phone. Firstly, she only had a card, and secondly, he was also angry. In the end, they decided to let both sides calm down first. As for the divorce she mentioned, he didn't think it would come to that. Even though they had slapped each other, and even though she had threatened him, he still didn't want a divorce. He asked himself, other than the marriage between the White and Night families, was there anything else? Actually, wasn't this a good time to negotiate with the riceworm? They could declare that their marriage had broken up at this point. They could maintain their marriage in name only and divorce when the time was right. For him, this was really advantageous. He really did not need such a stupid wife. She could not even solve the simplest questions in advanced mathematics. Her university diploma was bought with money, and she did not even pass CET-4. She was really not outstanding. However, it was precisely such a mediocre woman who infuriated him. Originally, he didn't have to go to the dinner, but after she made such a fuss, he really went. He went over. Everyone was there. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.